I am a writer in Naruto, chapter 61. After several people heard his voice, they all looked back, and saw that it was Yusha who hurriedly stood up and bowed, and respectfully called, Lord Grown. After straightening up, Yamada explained to Yunatsu, there are still some things that have not been done here, so I am working overtime. President, do you need help with anything after all this night? Waving his hand, Yusha said, I'm in a hurry to move this afternoon, so I haven't had time to eat yet, so I'm going to go out to eat something. Do you want to go together? Even in modern society, leaders will not refuse to invite people under them to eat. What's more, this world has not yet broken away from the feudal system. The class system is very obvious, and Yusha's status as the president. For several staff, it was an honor for Ma Shang. A trace of joy floated on the faces of several people, and they all nodded that they wanted to go, and Okita also responded. After all, no one could ask for a meal with the president. Yunatsu. Let's go. A group of several people talked and laughed down from the second floor, passing by the exhibition hall and heading straight to the door of the Konoha newspaper office. Because it was night, the exhibition hall was closed to the public, so the lights were almost completely off, except from the staircase to the door. Out of the door of the newspaper office, there is a commercial belt nearby, and various restaurants are still open, and a few people found a barbecue restaurant and walked in. This meal was eaten for an hour, and Yosha chatted with them at the table, and after it was over, the others went their own way, and Yosha had nothing to do, so he went back to the room on the 5th floor to wash up and fell asleep. Early the next morning, Yosha sat in his office and began to rush the manuscript, and he had to write the first section of This Killer Is Not Too Cold by 4 o'clock. The form of Konoha Daily is a morning newspaper, which means that the manuscript written today must be submitted to the editor-in-chief for review before 4 o'clock, and those that can be published will be selected and handed over to the editorial department for typesetting and editing. After typesetting, it is immediately sent to the printing house, and under normal circumstances, this process is about 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and it is 6 o'clock in the evening. The printing plant starts processing in the evening, and it will be completed at about 2 o'clock in the morning. At about 5 a.m., all the newsstands will have their newspapers available and they will go on sale. The other columns can be put on the first place, and then you can get it. Yusha plans to get the story section up first. I also said hello to Okita yesterday. Remove the boring news. Make room for him. So I hurried up to draft, This Killer Is Not Too Cold. This Killer Is Not Too Cold tells the story of a professional killer Leon who inadvertently rescues a little girl Matilda, whose whole family was killed, and he and the little girl have feelings for each other, and finally he dies to save Matilda. In the darkness, the heart is bright. When people encounter adversity, they do not improve the good. Leon saves the little girl Matilda, and at the same time she also redeems Leon. And the combination of Uncle and Lori is also a good selling point. The evaluation of This Killer Is Not Too Cold is extremely high, and Yusha believes that if the adaptation is successful, it will definitely be able to be in the entire Konoha village, or even a wave between the 5 great powers. So Yusha has already planned to divide the entire This Cold into several sections, and start serializing it in the Konoha Daily, firing the first shot in the Story section. Just when Yusha was frantically rushing the manuscript, she almost fell into madness, and she was about to die of a headache. This is all the fault of Konoha Love Story, to be precise, the final ending. After the last one of Konoha Love Story, it caused a huge wave throughout the village. The ending of the novel is that Kanji is with Satomi, and Miss Rika is lonely, which completely offends the village's Rika party. Miss Rika has deeply captured the hearts of many people almost from the moment she appeared. In the evening, when the evening glow spreads all over the western sky, a woman is waiting for an unknown young man. This image can be said to be a goddess, is the white moonlight in the reader's mind. The final ending of the novel is that Miss Rika is alone, which makes her fans completely unacceptable, and even falls into an extremely angry mood, so there are these few days. Yesterday, some of the disgruntled Rika faction only expressed their dissatisfaction by writing a letter of suggestion to Maruzentang to protest against the ending of the novel. And today, it has evolved into a door blocked by the Rika party to come to Maruzendo to say the law. When his subordinates reported to Peach, Peach decisively gave an order: hang up the temporarily closed sign. Sitting in the office, Momoko had a great headache, and gently rubbed her temples with both hands to relax her breathing. In fact, when she knew that Wanji was with Satomi, she expected this situation, but she didn't expect it to be so big. Now, Momoko can be said to have itchy teeth for Yusha's hate. Wait. You can't come in. Hey. Feed. What are you going to do? Before Momoko could ask, what's wrong, the door of the office was suddenly pushed open. The staff couldn't stop it, and they were very embarrassed to be squeezed at the back. Most of the people who squeezed in this group came in over the wall, either students who were studying in the ninja school, or upper ninja, middle ninja and the like. Of course, the most terrifying thing was some of the wives of the Konoha family. As soon as Peaches stood up, she was surrounded by a group of people, and she couldn't get through. Momoko, please tell us who is the author of Konoha Love Story. We are very dissatisfied with the ending. That's it. What's going on here? We're looking forward to a big reversal. Raising her hand to wipe a handful of cold sweat, Momoko waved her hand and said, everyone, please listen to me. Our Maruzendo principle is not to interfere with the author's creative process. Best of all, the author of the book has always been kept secret. We can't undermine the people of the principle. Nara Yoshino, who took the lead, said with his waist crossed, we just want to ask the author for an explanation. Miss Rika is such a perfect person and gave her a beautiful beginning, why can't she give her a perfect ending? Such a girl is lonely, is the author crazy? That's it. A woman still wearing a ninja costume clenched her fists and was indignant, but she had just come back from the mission and bought the last volume of Konoha Love Story, and after knowing the ending, she couldn't help but run over, and said with some gritted teeth, why do you have to let Miss Lixiong carry all this? It's so unfair. The people in my ears are constantly arguing, and Peaches is very principled and resolute not to say who the author is. The readers also just got up and didn't walk around the Peaches. Chapter 62. Kinomoto Momoko, the general person in charge of the entire Maruzendo, the boss above values her very much, and in order to prevent her from having an accident, he hired a shinobi at a high price to secretly protect her. Mei Aoki stood outside the door with an innocent face and listened to the commotion inside. Since she was hired as Momoko's personal bodyguard 5 years ago, she hadn't encountered a single emergency. Quietly pushing open a crack in the door, Aoki saw Momoko's helpless appearance through the crack in the door, blinked his eyes, and thought to himself. This should be killed, right? Sister Momoko is rarely panicked. Took out a smoke bomb from the ninja bag, Aoki directly kicked the wooden door open, bang, and then decisively threw the smoke bomb in. The office is so large that the visual distraction caused by a smoke bomb almost throws the whole room into chaos. Ahem. What's going on? Oops. Who stepped on my foot? Because the white smoke quickly spread throughout the office, Momoko couldn't help but raise the back of her right hand to cover her mouth and nose and cough twice, frowning and just about to ask what was going on. One hand held her left hand tightly. Momoko was startled, and was about to call out, when suddenly a hand covered her mouth, and Aoki's voice came, Sister Momoko, it's me. Don't talk, follow me. 293 Let's take advantage of the chaos to escape. Aoki's words immediately calmed Momoko's mood. She nodded, and then squeezed out with Aoki's push left and right, and after arriving at the office door, the two of them ran decisively towards the back door. The sound of shoes stepping on the wooden corridor is particularly clear, and the people who can climb over the wall to come in and talk to Momoko are basically experienced ninjas, which is obviously a person running away. Wind escape, whirlwind fist. A crisp female voice sounded, and I saw a female ninja in her 20s quickly seal her hands, and then threw a punch into the air, and a strong wind suddenly blew away all the white smoke around her, and at the same time, a few documents on Peach's table were also quickly flipped. After Nara Yoshino waited for her eyesight to recover, she saw that Momoko had really run away, and couldn't help but clench her fists and said, damn, I can't let Momoko run away, this is a battle for Miss Rika's happiness, let's chase. Be sure to catch the peaches. Mai Aoki ran out of the back door of Maruzendo with peaches in tow, but what she didn't expect was that someone blocked the back door. There were many people in the Rika party, Biffy, who had seen Momoko, and the moment they saw her, they immediately shouted her name excitedly, and the scene was very chaotic. The corners of Momoko's mouth twitched, and she looked like she was about to block the back door of Maruzendo, and shouted with a headache, "My God, isn't this enough? Sister Peach is fine, with me." Mai Aoki grinned brightly, and then suddenly hugged Princess Peach. Chakra gathered at the soles of her feet, bent her knees slightly, and jumped on the roof at once, and began to run with her. Don't let Kinomoto Momoko run away, she is the person in charge, only he knows who is the author of Konoha Love Story. Let's go, let's catch up. Under the call of a few people, a group of people around Maruzendo immediately chased in the direction of Aoki and Momoko, and it was also very spectacular for a while. Mai, you can just come down and pull me to run, you're too tired like this. Momoko said with some worry to Mai Aoki, who was constantly running. Mai Aoki shook her head and said, you can't outrun this group of people who are going crazy, and the group of ninjas who are surrounding your office will probably catch up after you in a while. Ordinary villager Momoko may not be able to run, but if you say that you are against a ninja, you will be completely useless. Even if the other party is a ninja, it is much faster than ordinary people. Biting her lower lip, Peach secretly made an account for Yusha in her heart. The huge momentum of the Rika party chasing after Momoko and Aoki alarmed a lot of people, and after figuring out the reason, new fans of Tokyo Love Story also joined the chase, and like a snowball, the number of people is increasing. Aoki is the boss to Peach specially hired ninja. The strength is definitely not low. When a group of ninjas want to catch up, she also decisively began to do it. The ninjas who caught up are not easy to mess with, all kinds of ninjutsu emerge endlessly. This group of people seemed to be tireless, and they ran for most of Konoha village. Such a grand scene is rare all year round. Some of the people who came to Konoha to do business and send tasks were also confused, and they thought that there was some civil war in Konoha or something. Such a big movement also alarmed the three generations who were working, and the constant sound of the crowd running outside and the sound of ninjutsu colliding made him put down his pen, and then stood up and walked to the window, wanting to find out. This look was completely confused. A female ninja with one hand around the head of Maruzendo, Kinomoto Momoko, was running while fighting, and the first batch followed behind was the upper ninja in several villages, some of which he could still call by name, and then the villagers. The third generation was a little confused. He turned to the secret guard who had been hiding all along, and said, what the hell is going on? Three generations. Recently, Maruzendo published a set of serialized pocket books, Konoha Love Story, and the ending set by the author is not the same as most readers think, so many people have found Maruzendo, hoping that Kinomoto Momoko can tell them who the author is. After Kinomoto refused, a group of people began to surround her, and then her personal bodyguard Mai Aoki ran away with her, and finally formed this situation. Quote, a member of the Shadow Division suddenly appeared and explained to Mio. It's not okay to go on like this. The third generation pondered for a while, and immediately gave an order to the members of the Dark Department who were half kneeling in front of him. You lead a team to stabilize the situation. If it is really difficult to control, contact someone from the police force to help. Nearly half of the people hiding in the Hokage's office disappeared in an instant. The three generations sat back at the table, looked at the documents on the table, and suddenly became very curious about what kind of book Konoha Love Story was. So he said, who of you knows what kind of book Konoha Love Story is? The members of the Dark Department glanced at each other, brushed the ground, half knelt in front of the three generations, took out a small book, and said one after another. Three generations, I have the 8th volume, do you want to read it? Three generations of adults, the 5th volume of the matter in my hands. I have the 6th volume. Azumo and Zidetsu, who happened to be on duty in the Hokage's office today, also tacitly took out a book from their pockets and said, Three generations, I have the 11th volume, the finale. The corners of the 3 generations of Hokage's mouths twitched, not to mention a single copy of their mother's hands, and they could still make up enough of a series. Chapter 63. The people in the dark department are very efficient, and before the people of the Konoha police force have time to make a move, this farce has ended, but Momoko obviously feels the unwillingness from the majority of the Lixiong party. But Peaches can't manage so much, she's going crazy along the way, and with the help of the dark department, she can be regarded as escaping. Aoki Mei is not much better. The amount of chakra consumed by running away with Peaches on her back is already large, and she has to be hunted down by Enshengnan at the same time, and there are ambushes on the road from time to time. Lying on her back on the roof, she stretched out a finger and said breathlessly, "Sister Peach, I asked the boss to give me a salary increase." Glancing at Mei Aoki very apologetically, Momoko shrugged her shoulders helplessly. "Mei, I've worked hard for you today. But I also want to raise wages." A large army also passed in front of the Konoha newspaper office, but Yusha had been indulging in rushing the manuscript, so he didn't notice the situation outside at all. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, Yusha successfully completed the first section of "This Killer Is Not Too Cold," and after putting down the pen, he rubbed his somewhat sore wrist and nodded with great satisfaction. The manuscript was sent to Okita, and because it was written by Yunatsu, he checked it for typos, and then asked the editorial staff to take the typesetting along with the selected news, and after the typesetting, he sent the latest issue of the Konoha Daily to the publishing house for printing. In a deserted forest on the border of the Land of Winds, there is a cliff here, and the horns are all carried into a hidden cave, which is pitch black, but there is another cave sky. In the center of the cave is a pair of strange stone pillar hands, which look like sacrifices and are held in the direction of the sky. The horn is placed along with the mound in the direction of the index finger of the stone pillar in his left hand, and then falls on the stone pillar next to it. If it weren't for the fact that Fijuan had completely fused with the rocks and dirt, he wouldn't have been able to run all the way to this secret stronghold to gather all the people. After leaving the battlefield that day, several people worked together to get the flying section out of this soil. Not to mention Deidara, both Scorpion and Horn are experienced and well informed. Although the horns are the main attack of the resentment and the Scorpion mainly uses puppets, this is not to say that they don't know other ninjutsu. The 3 of them thought that this matter could be easily handled at first, but the reality was unexpected. The 2 of them tried their best, but they didn't get the flying section out of the dirt. In desperation, Kakudu could only report the matter to Pain, because Scorpion and Deidara had other missions, so they didn't come to this stronghold with them. In addition to Jiaodu and Fijuan, who are real bodies, Heifei's real body is also here. The rest of the people came all in illusions, each standing in his place. Kakudu's green eyes rolled, and his thoughts began to report this time. Several people were slightly shocked after hearing that the 4 ninjas of Konoha had retreated, and Nagato also frowned. After all, they belong to the same organization, and the strength between them is still clear. It's unbelievable that the 4 ninjas of Konoha were able to retreat from the hands of the 4 of them, Kakuto and Scorpion, and let them look like this. When he heard Konoha, Uchiha Itachi was also slightly flustered. Unexpectedly, Kakuto and they actually ran into Konoha's ninja. But is there such a strong ninja in Konoha today? The ghost shark glanced at the weasel, who was a little distracted, bared his teeth and smiled very arrogantly, and asked, "Who is the other party, who can actually get the 4 of you? Next time I'll meet with Itachi." Quote. This time it was the Scorpion that spoke, and he glanced at everyone and said in a very hoarse voice, "We're up with Kakashi Hachiki, Matekai, and Mitarai Red Bean, and there's another one named Yuna." The moment he heard Kakashi, Ah-Fei's pupils shrank, but because unlike other members of the Shao organization, Ah-Fei stood on the ground without a ring, and he didn't notice his abnormality, and his face hidden under the mask was slightly stiff. Copy Ninja Kakashi. Itachi only said this sentence and then stopped talking. Since joining the Shao organization, the people who didn't talk too much have become even more reticent. Shao Nan was silent for a while and then asked, "Copy Ninja Kakashi and Azure Beast Matekai are the 2 people who have been famous for a long time in Konoha and are strong, but who are these Midori red beans and Unatsu? Ask for flowers. 0. While Jiaodu was trying to help Fijuan unearth, in the past few days, he also inquired about the identities of the two through the black market. He pursed his lips and said, "It's really a coincidence. That woman named Hongdu was the only apprentice that Orochimaru accepted when he was in Konoha village, but she was later abandoned." As soon as he heard the name Orochimaru, the entire Shao organization was a little bad. It was the only one who defected and Shao was still alive, and he also had a lot of information about them, especially the Scorpion. He had long been unhappy with Orochimaru, so he took over the task of chasing and killing Orochimaru at that time, but after so many years, he didn't succeed. It was simply an invisible mockery. The ghost shark touched his hair. That disgusting guy with Orochimaru, and he has taught apprentices. There was silence in the space for a while, and it was Pain who broke the silence, and he asked Kakato, "Is there anything special about that one named Yusha?" "Yes," Jiaodu nodded, then stretched out his hand and pointed to the flying section next to him, and said, "The flying section was made into what he is by that guy named Yusha, and he only used one move." Fei Duan, who had been holding back his words, was very unconvinced after hearing this, and couldn't help but start shouting, "Jiaodu, you give me a good talk, I was just careless." Cut. Deidara couldn't help but let out a sneer, and then said, "In addition, this one named Yusha also has a special ability, powerful medical ninjutsu." Matekai had obviously fallen for the evil magic of that guy in the flying section, and the one named Midori Red Bean was also blown off by me, and the son of the merchant who was blown up was all saved by him with one move and recovered in an instant. Quote, "How is this possible?" The ghost shark was stunned for a moment, and then immediately retorted, "If it is blown up, it can be resurrected, don't you tell a joke." Even Tsunadiheim, who is famous in the 5 major countries, doesn't dare to say that she has this ability. The scorpion shook its tail and said calmly, "That guy named Yusha did it at that time. And I've also investigated this person named Yusha in the black market, and I can't find any information at all. It's a very strange person. The horns are all said to be powerful." Chapter 64. It has only been more than 3 months since Yusha appeared in this world. After Konoha barely had the strength to endure it, all he did was D-level tasks such as running errands and looking after the store, and other than that, he was staying at home. Publishing Konoha Love Story is the most famous thing for Yusha Gon, but he didn't write it with his real name at all. Therefore, no one in the black market would collect information about such a nobody, and the corner naturally couldn't find out about him. Can't even inquire about the black market. Black and White said a little strangely, "This is rare." Deidara raised her hand and stroked her hair, and said in shock, "It's not. The key is that this one called Yosha seems to know all about the 4 of us." Quote, "That's right," Jiaodu nodded, and said with a headache, "The other party's observation ability is very strong and well informed. Just by relying on a few of our moves, we can basically guess our identity and weaknesses." Quote, Ah Fei frowned and listened to several people discussing Yusha, which was also strange. According to what Kakudu and Scorpion said, that Yusha should not be a general, and there are not many medical ninjas who are famous in the entire 5 major countries. He thought about it for a while, and he had no impression. Standing on the 10 stone pillars, the members of Shao discussed for a long time and finally decided on the progress of the recent mission before ending the meeting. Heibai-ju glanced at the direction of the flying section and said, "We will take the flying section away. You will act alone for the time being during this time, and I will join you when the problem of the flying section is solved. The matter of the flying segment is finally assigned to be dealt with by Jerry." Well, Jiaodu tilted his neck from side to side, rubbed his wrist and said, "I can do this kind of thing by myself." Pain, controlled by Nagato, looked around and suddenly spoke. "Yusha, this person needs to be investigated. He is a ninja of Konoha. If it is really as mysterious as the 4 of you said, it will definitely become an obstacle for us. However, it is a question of who to send. Scorpion and Deidara still have a mission, and the target is not in the Fire Country. Itachi is too familiar with Konoha village, but Konoha is also familiar with Itachi, and if he rushes back, his identity may be exposed. Black and white, Ah Fei is going to take Fei Duan back again. Xiao Nan was silent for a while, and felt that it was more appropriate for her to go in person, so she said, Nagato, I'll go to Konoha for a trip. After finishing speaking, she turned her head to look at Jiaodu again and said, Jiaodu, you can put aside the money-making business for a while, and go to Konoha village with me. Kakudu nodded, indicating that it was okay. It's just that Nagato glanced at Xiao Nan and wanted to say something, but in the end he didn't speak. This is the best arrangement. Was targeted by the Xiao organization, but Yusha was one. Back to Konoha here, Momoko didn't come home after work, and she planned to go to Konoha newspaper to talk to Yunatsu. Maruzendo and Konoha newspaper used to be the same boss, so there's a lot of cooperation between each other. Momoko was directly led to Yusha's office after explaining his intentions. Momoko gently pushed open the door, first showing a head, looking at Yusha who was still working hard, and couldn't help laughing. President Yusha, you're really busy, why don't you get off work yet? Yusha was thinking about where to start to rectify the newspaper office next, and when she heard the familiar voice, she looked in the direction of the door, and Momoko had already stepped on the clogs and walked in, smiling. Hurriedly stood up, Yusha said, Sister Peach, why are you here? You may be seated. Quote. Momoko was not polite, put the bag on the table, and then went directly to the opposite side of Yusha, and then began to look around, and said with a smile, Your office is very well decorated, and the people below use it well. Well, it's okay. Yusha went back and forth, poured a cup of hot water for Peaches, put it in front of her, and then returned to her seat and asked, Sister Peach, why are you here today? Why do you look tired? He also noticed that Momoko's kimono looked dirty, as if she had experienced strenuous exercise. Momoko glanced at Yusha with some complaint, and then began to say, It's not because of the ending you wrote. Wanji and Satomi together caused a lot of dissatisfaction with the Lixiong party, and they sent us letters to make suggestions since yesterday, and then today it was directly changed to a door-to-door siege. For this situation, in fact, Yusha also expected it. He winked at Peaches embarrassedly, and said, Sister Peach, didn't you encounter this kind of thing last time? I believe you should handle it well, right? Can you compare the situation last time to this one? Momoko sighed, rolled her eyes helplessly, and said, Today, about a dozen shinobi ran to my office to surround me, and Mrs. Nara is here. If it weren't for my personal guards running all the way on my back, I would have been forced to confess, alas. Fortunately, someone from the dark department came out to appease me in the end, otherwise I wouldn't know how to end it. Quote. So exaggerated. Yusha was stunned for a moment. He didn't expect this matter to be in the shadows, which means that the 3 generations of Hokage should also know. Momoko nodded and said, Yes, this is also unexpected. It is estimated that there will be thousands of people chasing me and Mei together. Yusha looked serious after hearing this. Fortunately he didn't choose to use his real name at that time, otherwise he would be the one who was chased today. However, this also shows from the side that Konoha love story is popular. From tomorrow, I plan to start sending the supply of the bound edition of Konoha Love Story to the bookstore outside. Although today's incident is terrible, but it also gives me confidence, since it can be so popular in Konoha village. Let readers go so crazy, and the sales in the market of other countries will definitely not be low. Momoko dragged her chin and suddenly began to talk to Yusha about business. 2.4.4 said with crooked eyebrows, The market outside is bigger than Konoha village, and we should be able to make a lot of money by then. Yusha's eyes lit up when he heard this. This is really good news. After all, he still has a debt of 20 million per month, and he couldn't help but say, Sister Peach, how many sales do you expect to have? The sales volume is not clear, but it must be more profitable than in the village, so you can rest assured. Momoko hooked her hand at Yusha and said, I want to ask you something. Are you planning to open a new book? Book. After hearing this, Yusha was stunned for a moment, then thought for a while, nodded at Peaches and said, I thought about opening a new book, or use the previous pocketbook model of 1 change a day, but I need 2 days to prepare. After all, I just took over Konoha newspaper, and there have been a lot of things going on lately. Chapter 65. Today is a very ordinary morning in Konoha village, quiet and peaceful, with the occasional flock of birds flying in the sky, chirping to welcome the morning light, and the day has begun. In the early morning, there are pedestrians on the streets, workers cleaning the streets, Konoha police officers patrolling and inspecting, ninjas who get up early for morning exercises, shop owners who are busy opening, and so on. Asma is a rough man with a very regular schedule, and when he has no tasks, he shows up on the street early every day, buys a copy of Konoha Daily, and reads the breakfast restaurant he usually goes to for breakfast, a typical single old man's daily life. Konoha Daily is the only newspaper in the entire Konoha village, produced by Konoha newspaper and sold at major newsstands starting at 5 o'clock in the morning. When he came to the newsstand, Asma shouted to the boss who was dozing with his hands on his hands, "Boss, come to a copy of the Konoha Daily." Just put the money and take the newspaper yourself." The boss raised his eyelids worriedly, and after vaguely seeing that the person who came was Asma, he closed his eyes with peace of mind. The two of them are familiar with each other, so they are not afraid of his 11-ma pit him. The boss may have been drunk until he was drunk last night, and he can still smell a smell of alcohol. Asma smiled and put the money on the table, and took a copy of the Konoha Daily, himself, reading it as he walked. Halfway through the reading, Asma was a little strange. He stopped, and muttered strangely, "What's going on? How is it that today's newspaper is different from the old one?" Strange in his heart, Asma directly turned over the last few pages and looked at them one by one, and found that compared with before, there was a lot less boring junk news, so the newspaper left a large space at the end with a few big words, "Novel column." Novel column. Asma read it softly, and became interested. This, Konoha Daily, said that he had also read it for a few years. This was the first time he saw a story section. He directly folded the newspaper to the novel column, wanting to see what kind of novel was written. "This killer is not too cold. Hey, it's an interesting name. Aren't all killers ruthless?" This author actually gave such a name, Tisk. Quote. When Asma saw the name of the book, he couldn't help but silently comment in his heart, although the name was unrealistic in his eyes, but it also aroused his interest, and he continued to read on. Taverns are usually at their busiest in the evening, and at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. At this obviously unjust moment, a man with dark round glasses came, with a strong body, as if every muscle contained a powerful explosive power. When he arrived at the tavern, he walked into a small private room without greeting anyone. His name is Leon, and he's a killer. Single quote. It's just a beginning, and there are not too many fancy language carvings, but it deeply grasps Asma. The way Leon appears has a tough guy style. Let him empathize, as if that cool man was him. Asma read on. From Leon to talking to the old man of the joint, going to work, let a rich businessman be obedient. Every detail tightly grasps people's hearts, especially the endless methods in the fighting link, so that Asma is inexplicably happy after reading it. Hey, Asma, aren't you going to have a bowl of noodles today? The owner of the soba noodle shop asked anxiously as he saw Asma, a regular customer, passing in front of him holding a newspaper. Asma's morning at Konoha village usually starts with a newspaper and a bowl of soba noodles. Seeing Asma passing by the door of his store with the standard newspaper but not coming in, the owner of the soba was very conflicted, and wondered if he had found a new soba shop, so he didn't come anymore. After the sense of crisis arises, the boss immediately yells at Asma, wanting to find out the truth. When Asma heard her name, she first touched her head with a confused face, then reacted, and saw that she was still 3 steps away from walking through the soba noodle restaurant, so she quickly opened the curtain and went in, and said embarrassedly, "I was so engrossed by the Konoha Daily just now that I forgot to look at the road. Boss, bring me a bowl of soba noodles, extra tempura, and an egg." Okay. The boss listened to the familiar recipe and happily began to eat the soba noodles, but fortunately his regular customers were not lost. While Asma was sitting and waiting, she took the newspaper and continued to read. This killer is not too cold. Leon's house is rented. He doesn't care where he lives, he just came back from the mission, but when he went upstairs, he met a strange little girl, short hair, a pair of beautiful eyes full of vigilance, a bruise on the cheekbones. She looked at Leon, who suddenly came up and forced a smile and greeted him. The conversation between the two men was a little awkward, and Leon soon returned to his room, where the little girl, Matilda, was nothing more than his neighbor, and he didn't know each other. But no one would have thought that this little girl in the neighborhood would be the heroine of the whole novel, and her somewhat rebellious appearance was even a little cute. "Hey, man, 643, your face." The boss brought a bowl of deluxe noodles to Asma, and said helplessly, "I really don't know why you are so obsessed with Konoha daily. Is there something big happening today? You usually smell the smell of noodles and put down the newspaper." After hearing this, Asma raised his head and smiled at the uncle and said, "It's almost over, this is the end, and I'm eating after I'm done. Today's Konoha daily is a little interesting." Matilda was kicked out again. Matilda's sister often squeezed her, and her stepmother didn't like her and often made her angry, so she just beat her, and the gambler's father saw that she was upset and threw her a handful of money to buy ingredients, and only her younger brother would hold her and call her sister softly. Standing in the hallway, Matilda's nose was broken and blood was pouring down, and Leon met the girl again, hesitated for a moment, and handed the handkerchief to her. Matilda was stunned for a moment, then took the handkerchief, wiped the bloodstains, and then raised her head and asked calmly, "Is life always so painful? Or is it only when I was a child?" "Always," Leon replied calmly. "This is not the end." Asma continued to look down, and couldn't help but sigh at the author's understanding of life revealed through the male protagonist Leon. Enough to be in place, _ Chapter 66. Matilda raised her head to look at the somewhat dumbfounded uncle. The corners of her mouth cracked widely, revealing her white teeth, and smiling, she very briskly asked Leon if he needed milk. She could bring it herself. Leon was stunned for a long time, not knowing how to respond. Matilda spoke again and asked, "Is it needed?" Looking at the bright smile for a moment, Leon nodded his head in agreement, and then the little girl ran downstairs excitedly to buy milk and ingredients from a nearby store. Asma touched the beard on her chin, still a little disapproving of Leon's actions. As a killer, he should be ruthless and desireless. He would be burned so early in night. At this time, there were many people who read the newspaper like Asma, but no one expected that a carton of milk would entangle the two people after that so deeply. "Hey, Asma. Don't eat it yet. It's only 6:30 in the morning, and there aren't many people coming to the store to eat noodles, so the boss can't help but tell him again when he's free. Soba noodles have to be eaten hot to taste." "Oops. Boss, I'll eat it now." Asma replied with 2 sentences, but her eyes were fixed on the newspaper and she continued to keep an eye on the direction of the plot. Gamblers will always think that they are the one who is favored by God, and it is because of this that they have gambling debts on their bodies, until people block the door. Several ninjas burst into the rental building, and the one in the lead, with a weed in his mouth, kicked it open at Matilda's door. "Ah, Tilda, who are you?" "Dad, someone." "Yes." The crackling sound next door caught Leon's attention, and his long-term career as a killer made him immediately run to the door and look out through a small hole in the door. Except for a ninja guarding the door of the little girl's house, all of them entered her house. There was the sound of gunshots, the sound of kunai cutting his throat, the sound of a shuriken inserting into the flesh, the screams of a woman. It's all mixed up and it's very noisy. Suddenly, Matilda walked up the stairs with 2 large tubs of milk, and the moment she saw a tall man standing in front of her house, she clearly sensed the danger, and suddenly, her heart beat rapidly. She can't stop, and if she does. Despite the fact that her legs were already limp, Matilda still passed by the door of her house without changing her face, and at that moment she stole a glance inside. Blood, and her gambler father. After turning her back to the man, Matilda's expression was already a little out of control, because the tears of fright couldn't help but flow down. She walked to Leon's door, raised her hand and knocked on the door. Please, let me in. Leon stood behind the door. From the door Xiaohao could see Matilda's face. Tears had reached his chin. He looked very embarrassed. He walked around a little irritably, let go of his hand again, and put it on again. Asma put down the newspaper and took a long breath. The 4 big words, "To be continued," were printed in his eyes, a little dazzling. The corners of his mouth twitched, and his heart was a little slight. This author is really a good means to stop the article at a critical juncture. But Leon probably won't open the door, right? For a little girl who has just met a passerby in life, he can't afford to mess with a ninja hired by a casino. But that's just Asma's idea. He wants to know more about how the author arranged, and there will be results tomorrow. He forcibly suppressed the desire to know the follow-up plot that rose in his heart, put the Konoha daily aside, and began to eat the soba noodles that were already half completely cold. After Asma finished eating the soba noodles, he gave the money to the boss and left with the newspaper. When the boss cleaned up the dishes and chopsticks, he found that there was not a drop left in Asma's bowl as usual, so he couldn't help but drink, and said in surprise, "The soba noodles are cold, and they can still be eaten with relish. What's going on with today's Konoha Daily, or I'll have to buy a copy when I'm free." Quote. At 7 or 8 o'clock, the neighborhood began to be lively, and there was a young woman who looked about 20 years old, Minako, who went out to buy the day's ingredients, and then went to the newsstand to buy a copy of the Konoha Daily, to pass the time. 2 days ago, she just finished reading Konoha Love, and now she doesn't have to read it, so she can only read the newspaper as usual. Her husband went to work, and Minako cleaned the room, made herself a cup of hot tea, and sat in the living room to take out the newspaper to kill time. Drinking Asma is different. Minako didn't notice that the Konoha Daily had changed, and it wasn't until he read the novel column, step by step, that he raised his eyelids in surprise. Novel. I was very excited, but Minako pursed her lips when she saw the title of This Killer Is Not Too Cold, and couldn't help but sigh. It should be a description. Ninja autobiography. Her favorite is still Love and the like. But it's okay to stay. Minako simply read it down. When I saw the name of the male protagonist, for a moment, puzzled, Leon. It's a strange name. It sounds like it's from the land of thunder. Minako continued to read, and in less than half of her whole body began to get excited, and she couldn't help but sigh. Oh my god, the author's writing is too good. The fight scene can be described so well. Leon is so handsome, a silent killer uncle, with a strong body and a dull appearance. Especially after Matilda appeared, Minako couldn't help but start screaming, and the whole person was not sitting on her knees in a proper manner. She went back and covered half of her face with a newspaper, and couldn't help but snicker. It's a story between a killer uncle and a girl. Oh my god, this is too crisp. Minako blushed for a while, then rolled over and fell on the floor, continuing to read, her face flushed, and when she saw Matilda crying and standing in front of Leon's door, she couldn't help but be heartbroken. Secretly wiped a handful of tears for poor Matilda, Minako just wanted to continue reading, but turned the page and found that this was the last page of the Konoha newspaper. She came back to her senses, sat up suddenly, and couldn't help but complain. This is a serialized novel. No way. I'm going to be like Konoha Love Story, again, buying and chasing every day. Wait. Suddenly Minako felt that something was wrong, and picked up the newspaper again, just attracted by the storyline so I didn't notice it, but now if you look closely, this writing is a little familiar. Chapter 67. This is clearly the writing of the author of Konoha Love Story. Minako immediately got up, ran back to her room with the newspaper, took out the latest copy of Konoha Love Story from the bookshelf and carefully compared it with This Killer Is Not Too Cold. She knocked on the skull, and said regretfully, "Why didn't you see it earlier? I'm so stupid." Although Konoha Love Story and This Killer Is Not Too Cold are two completely different novels, Yusha's writing is very special. After all, Yusha has lived in modern times, and there are many differences between it and the Hokage's world. and when writing novels, his rhetoric and expressions will inadvertently write the style of modern literature, which is beyond Yusha's control. After all, it is decades of edification. When Minako knew that the two novels she was chasing were by the same author, the whole person was a little unkind. You must know that she was a Lixiong party. She also participated in yesterday's event where the Rika party frantically intercepted the person in charge of Maruzendo. It was the first time she ran crazy on the street regardless of her image. I hope to know who the author is from the mouth of Kinomoto Momoko. The final ending is, of course, a failure, which makes Minako very regretful. 710 inches alas. Minako sighed and rested her chin on the bookshelf. Now she was really worried that the author would ruin the ending of This Killer Is Not Too Cold. She really couldn't believe that Leon and Matilda would be separated in the end. Today is the first day after the change of Konoha Daily, and the sales of the newspaper have increased slightly, and there has been no explosive growth, which is also expected by Yusha. After all, the crowd of people who buy newspapers is generally very fixed, and if a person does not have the she of reading newspapers, he will not suddenly rise to buy them. However, as long as the sales of the newspaper can be seen to increase compared to the previous issues, then it is a good trend. Konoha Daily is not only issued once, it is to be published for a long time, so there is no rush for a while. A newsstand in the western district of Konoha Village. The owner of this newsstand likes to go to the Nodding Nod's noon income after lunch, and today when he counted the balance of newspapers, he was surprised to find that more newspapers were sold today than before. This is not a common thing, and the newsstand owner knows better what kinds of people buy newspapers. First, ninjas who often go out on missions, and read newspapers to learn about recent events in the village. Second, high-level people who are concerned about the development of the village, who are obviously more interested in the regulations promulgated by the village or the Land of Fire. The third is idle housewives, who will also use newspapers to pass the time when they are bored after doing housework. In addition, there will be other groups of people buying, shop owners, idle middle-aged men, students trying to complete tasks, etc., but these are in the minority. In the case of such a clear audience, the sales of Yi Daily have been stable at a horizontal line. Most of the cases are below the horizontal line, and this is the first time that the sales volume is higher than the horizontal line. No wonder the newsstand owner is very surprised. The newsstand owner took a newspaper directly for himself, and he wanted to see what was different about today's Konoha Daily. It took nearly half an hour to read the whole newspaper, and the newsstand owner was going to get more goods the next day. No wonder the sales were a little better. It turned out to be a revised version of the Konoha Daily, and there was an additional novel column in it. The most important thing is that the column, This Killer Is Not Too Cold, is really well written. This happened to most of the kiosks in Konoha Village, and many newsstand owners would go to find out if they noticed an increase in newspaper sales, and almost all of them decided to pick up more of the next day. Minako dressed herself up and went out with her cyan canvas bag, and today she was going to visit her friend BBDB Yutsuki Yuyan. Before getting married, Yutsuki Shion and Minako's homes were next to each other, and the two of them were best friends who grew up together, and if Shion was not on duty, the two would basically get together. In the past 2 days, I took 2 days off in a row, and yesterday Minako and she went to block the door of Maruzendo together, intending to find out the original author of Konoha Love Story, but unfortunately failed. For this matter, both of them can be said to be angry. Now that Minako has received such important information, she can't help but share it with Yuyan. When Minako came to knock on the door, Yuyan had just gotten up. She rubbed her eyelids a little worriedly, yawned and said, "Minako, why are you here early in the morning?" "I haven't slept enough." Looking at the woman who hadn't woken up yet, Minako said helplessly, "Shion, it's afternoon, you actually told me that it was early in the morning. What were you doing last night?" Welcoming people in, Shion dragged the clogs and threw her body into the soft sofa, and after signaling Minako to sit casually, she cheered up and said, "I stayed up all night last night, and I watched Konoha Love Story, from beginning to end. You see my eyes are swollen from crying, Miss Rika is so pitiful." Happened to mention Konoha love story. Minako hurriedly took out a stack of boxy newspapers from her canvas bag and spread them out in front of Shion, pointing and saying, "Look at it, this is a novel called This Killer Is Not Too Cold, which is currently serialized in Konoha Daily." Huh. What the hell are you doing? Shion was a little strange. She got up and picked up the newspaper, and after reading it for 3 minutes, she said in surprise, "Minako, this is not right. Why do I think this person's writing is so familiar?" "Like what?" Minako spoke. "Konoha love story." Yes. It's Konoha love story." Shion looked at it twice, then nodded affirmatively, and said, "There is absolutely nothing wrong. The writing of these two novels is exactly the same. It can't be the same author, right?" Clapping her hands, Minako said excitedly, "I think so too. The author of This Killer Is Not Too Cold should be the person we are looking for." Maruzendo's Kinomoto Momoko hides the news too tightly, but we can start with the Konoha newspaper. Quote. "What you said is also feasible," Yutsuki Shion thought for a while and said, "The reporters of Konoha newspaper are originally in the news business, and I don't think they will be too strict." The two hit it off and were ready to investigate. Before that, Shion first finished reading all of This Killer Is Not Too Cold, and freshened up before going out. Chapter 68. When Minako and Yuyan came to the Konoha newspaper office together, they were immediately attracted by a large red sticker posted on the door, and the job advertisement at the top was really hard to ignore. The position recruited by the Konoha newspaper this time is a secretary, and the one who asks for recruitment is naturally Yusha, who is a new official. In fact, he didn't have so much work to do after he took over the Konoha newspaper, but he couldn't stop him from being lazy. And after becoming the president of the Konoha newspaper, Yusha is a little floating, and the president who doesn't have a secretary feels shabby no matter what, and he still has to be in line. The two of them stood in front of the job advertisement, and Minako bit the middle finger of her right hand and took a cursory look from top to bottom, and then said to Yuyan, "Konoha newspaper is recruiting a secretary to the president." Ah, it's recruiting at this time. Shion said it casually, but he didn't take it too seriously. After all, the recruitment season in Konoha village is generally in spring. If it's autumn, it's generally a special move. "Hey, Shion, look, a reporter has come out, let's go up and ask." Minako's sharp eyes immediately spotted a young man in his 20s walking out of the building of the Konoha newspaper office with a bulky camera on his back, and immediately touched it lightly with his elbow. Shion, who got the signal, immediately pulled someone up to greet him, and greeted him with a smile. "Hello, I'm Azuki Shion, and next to me is Miss Minako. Can I disturb you for a few minutes?" The young reporters were visibly stunned. Isn't this the opening line that their reporters use when interviewing others? "Hello, is there something going on?" Minako immediately took out the Konoha Daily from her canvas bag, handed it to the other party, and said, "That's right, I bought a newspaper this morning, and found that a new novel column has been added to the newspaper, and after reading the novel, This Killer Is Not Too Cold, in this column, I am very interested in the author, do you know?" Took the newspaper and glanced at the name of the author of This Killer Is Not Too Cold. The young reporter shook his head and returned it to Minako, and said apologetically, "Recently, our newspaper has a new president, and he got the novel column, but I don't know the author of This Killer Is Not Too Cold." At that time, Yunatsu's manuscript was directly handed over to Okita, so no one else knew about it. After hearing the other party's words, Minako said with some loss, "Ah. If you don't even know about the Konoha newspapers, what should you do?" Shiyan also frowned, looking thoughtful. "I thought that there would be news of the author when I arrived at the Konoha newspaper office, but is it going to be broken again?" The young reporter couldn't help but panic when he looked at the two beauties who were a little lost in front of him, and then coughed and said, "Actually, you can ask our editor-in-chief, he has always been the one who checks the review of Konoha Daily, so he should know who the author of This Killer Is Not Too Cold is." After Yuyan and Minako thanked him, they walked into the newspaper building, intending to ask the editor-in-chief Okita in person, but as soon as the two entered the door, they were stopped by a formally dressed front desk lady. The front desk stopped the two with a smile, and then, "Is there something wrong with the two of you?" Both of them were stunned. They couldn't have said that they were here to arrest the author of "This Killer Is Not Too Cold," right? If that were the case, the front desk wouldn't let them in. Minako suddenly remembered the red job advertisement at the gate of the Konoha newspaper office, and she said to the front desk, "Hello, I'm Minako Fujita, this is Yutsuki, and the two of us are here to apply for secretaries." Ah, it turned out to be a secretary. The front desk suddenly realized, then moved around, and after greeting the other front desk, he said to Minako and Yuyan, "You two come with me, and I'll take you to meet the president." The selection of the secretary this time was personally reviewed by him. Quote, after going up to the fourth floor, the front desk noticed two people standing at the door of the conference room at the end of the corridor, and suddenly remembered in surprise that the chairman had said that there was a high-level meeting this afternoon, and that it was going on. The front desk said apologetically to Minako and Yuyan, "I'm sorry, the president is in a meeting right now, can you two wait a while?" Minako and Yuyan nodded at the same time. As long as they can catch the author, the two of them are not in a hurry. There were not many people in the conference room, except for the chairman Yusha and the editor-in-chief Yamada. All of them were the heads of various departments of the Konoha newspaper, and several people were listening carefully to Yusha's arrangement. Asking for flowers. The main purpose of Yuna's meeting was the press department, and when he finished talking about some small problems from other departments, he took a sip of water and slowed down, and then looked at the first person on his left, Saito Kasai, the head of the press department. "Minister Saito, the press department has always been the main force of the Konoha newspaper, and I hope that you will pay attention to the following 3 points when gathering and editing news. As for the reform of the Konoha Daily, it is natural to start with the press department. Yusha's requirements are also very simple. Streamline the news should be based on major events and important events, and recently pay more attention to the collection and editing of commercial news, and he plans to make the business news section in the next few days." When the door of the conference room opened, the ministers of various departments came out one after another, and they didn't stay too long. The content of the meeting just now should be implemented as soon as possible. Saito's face was very heavy, this time the burden on his body was very heavy. Yusha and Yamada's editor-in-chief were the last to come out, and the two of them were talking and laughing, but they didn't know what they were talking about. The front desk immediately gave Minako and Yuyan a look, and led the two people forward. She bowed to Yusha and Okita and said, "Lord, Okita editor-in-chief, these two young ladies behind me are here to apply for secretaries." When the two of them saw that the new president was a child, Yuyan and Minako were very surprised. They all thought that the new president of Konoha newspaper should be the kind of successful middle-aged man, but they didn't expect it to be a little bean ding. What was even more surprising was Shion. She looked at Yusha in disbelief. "You must know that when this child first came to Konoha village, she was in charge of monitoring. When Yusha first came to Konoha village, he was still a poor boy who was crazy about low-level tasks to have money to eat and rent a house. How did he become the new president of Konoha newspaper in just a few months?" When looking at Shion, Yusha also had some doubts in her heart. Is the treatment of the dark department so bad now? They all jumped ship to apply for secretaries. Putting away his doubts, Yusha signaled to the front desk that he could go back, and then said hello to Okita, and took Yuyan and Minako to his office. Chapter 69. The door to the office has just been closed, and before Yunatsu's butt has sat in the office chair, Minako is about to lose her breath, and she puts her hand in her canvas bag and is about to take out the newspaper and ask directly. Yuyan's eyes were quick, and she immediately understood Minako's intentions. She quickly grabbed Minako's arm with her hand, squeezed it hard, and then said with a smile at Yunatsu, "President, can you please tell us where the toilet is? I'm a little nervous. To be honest, it was rude to suddenly ask to go to the toilet when I was applying." But Yusha didn't care. Anyway, he was fine this afternoon. just stayed in the office, and he wasn't in a hurry. Turn left after going out and be at the end of the hallway. Yusha said very kindly. Thank you, President, we'll be back in a moment. After Xian knew the location and thanked Yusha, she immediately pulled Mui Na's 280 away. Her rectum is really a headache. Manako, who was dragged to the toilet, looked strange, and she asked Xian, Xian, why did you stop me just now? Although he was a child just now, he is the president. He must know who the author of "This Killer Is Not Too Cold" is. Quote. I couldn't help but stretch out my hand and flick Monaco's braincase, and Xian said with some hatred, stupid. The two of us lied and said that we came to apply for a job and got in, but as soon as we met, we asked about the author. Can the president tell the truth? Maybe he will blow us out directly. Manako thought about it. She patted her chest, and couldn't help but say nervously, I was thoughtless just now, but fortunately you stopped me just now, otherwise I messed things up. What should we do now? Xian frowned and thought for a while, and suddenly came up with a good solution. Her eyes lit up, and she said, we can take advantage of the situation to apply for the position of Secretary of the President, so that we will definitely know the author's information easily, and maybe we can directly meet the other party to contribute. As long as we know who the author is, we can find a reason to resign at that time. Quote. This method is good, but which of the two of us will apply for this position? I tell you, I can't do it. You know my husband, and you don't seem to be able to do it. Manako nodded quickly after hearing Xian's method, but she had a headache about who should apply. Xian couldn't help frowning when she heard this, and muttered, this is indeed a problem. Manako is a housewife. If you want to come out to work, you need to communicate well with your husband. And Xian is currently a member of the dark department. If it's a mission, it's also very inconvenient. Both of them were in a dilemma for a while. Forget it, I don't want to. Manako knocked her head and said, the two of us will go in for an interview in a while, and if the president wants to keep whoever he wants, we will stay. Quote. While Yuyan and Manako are thinking about countermeasures, Yusha is also frowning and thinking in the office. I didn't think about it deeply just now, but if I think about it, the other party is not good. It is really strange that a member of Xian's dark department actually came to him to be a secretary. The salary of the dark department is definitely not low, by Hokage's relatives' troops, and the old man is the most proficient of all the Hokage, so the treatment of the dark department will definitely not be Xian will definitely not be guilty of jumping ship. Frowning, Yusha began to think crankily. If a member of the dark department is suddenly picked up for an interview, then it is very likely that there is an undercover mission. Will Xian be 3 generations sent to keep an eye on him? The more Yusha thought about it, the more he felt that there was such a possibility, although he had officially joined Konoha and became a legal resident of Konoha yet, but think about it carefully. When he first came, he had a good relationship with Shikamaru, Dingji, and Ino, and these 3 were the heirs of the Nara clan, the Akito clan, and the Yamanaka clan respectively. And recently, Yusha has directly formed a gang, and has a good relationship with Azuki, Kakashi, and Kai, and pulls them to invest in shares together, and get such a big piece of industry as Konoha Daily, and it has only been a few months to make such a big battle, and it is not impossible to be targeted. The more Yusha thought about it, the more he felt that Xian was sent by the 3rd generation, although he seemed to be a very kind old man on the surface, and he rarely had a serious face when he was a child in Konoha village, but looking at the things he had done, it was extremely scary to think about it carefully, and he was not that simple. Just when Yusha was still thinking, there were suddenly 3 knocks on the door. Coming back to his senses, Yusha said, come in. Manako and Yuyan pushed the door in, and then stood in front of Yunatsu and shouted together, President. Yusha sorted out his thoughts for a moment, then stretched out his hand to the 2 people, gestured to the 2 chairs opposite his desk, and said, please sit down, 2 of you. Quote. After the 2 of them sat down, Yusha first smiled, and then spoke. Can you 2 introduce yourself briefly? Shion was the first to speak. My name is Uyu Shion, I am 20 years old this year, and I am a ninja. Quote. Manako. My name is Manako Fujita, I'm also 20 years old this year, and I'm a housewife now. Quote. Oh. Yunatsu glanced at Manako in surprise and said a little strangely, are you tired of being a housewife and come to work? Coughing a little, Manako explained to Yusha with a serious face. No, it's because I love the secretarial industry, and I like to read the Konoha daily, and it is my goal to be able to enter the Konoha newspaper, and I hope the president can give me this opportunity. Quote. The corners of his mouth twitched, and the official answer, Yusha groaned for a moment, and said with a little embarrassment, that's the case, being my secretary is very busy, and I need professionals if I haven't done it before. Hearing this, Manako suddenly became lost, and now she can only rely on Shion, otherwise she won't be able to find out the author. Ahem, what about you, why do you want to be a secretary? Yusha coughed 3.7 times, changed the topic, and moved her gaze to Shion. Shion weighed it for a moment, and then replied, I'm too tired to be a ninja and want to change to a more peaceful job. After a pause, he continued, also, I used to work as a clerical officer when I was a ninja before, so I think I can do it. Quote. Really? Yusha pretended to be surprised and said, if you really worked as a clerical officer, it should be fine to be my secretary. Quote. In fact, no matter what Shion said, Yusha planned to keep her. After all, if she was really sent by the third generation, even if she refused, there would be other members of the Dark Department to apply. There are so many members of the Dark Department, and Yusha only knows a few, so he leaves a familiar face, and it is easier for him to control the situation, and this is also the reason for rejecting Manako. Yusha doesn't know the other party's bottom at all. Chapter 70. Early the next morning, after the 3 generations of Hokage had just entered the office and sat down, before he could make a hot chair, there was a knock on the door. Strange, who is it this early in the morning? Aren't the people who usually come to deliver official documents after 9 o'clock? Said the third generation as he touched his goatee and muttered with a confused expression. After Shion, who was standing at the door, got permission, she pushed the door and entered. She came to ask for leave today. It's a time of peace, and the leave system of the Dark Ministry is very humane, and every member of the Dark Ministry has more than 10 days of paid leave. So far, Shion has not taken a leave of absence. Yesterday, she had already applied for the president's secretary, and she had to stay at the Konoha newspaper office until she dug up the authors of the books, Konoha Love Story, and This Killer Is Not Too Cold. That's why she came to ask for leave today. Ah, it's Yuyan Tilda. The 3 generations of Hokage looked at the people who walked in, smiled gently, and said, aren't you on duty today? Why are you here in civilian clothes? Walking to the center of the office, Shion said directly, 3 generations, I want to ask for 15 days of vacation, I hope you can approve it. Quote. Ah. The 3 generations of Hokage opened their mouths in surprise and said strangely, are you in such a hurry? Why did you suddenly take such a long leave? The other members on duty in the Dark Department hidden in the dark were also very strange. They looked left and right, and they all shook their heads, and they didn't know what Shion was doing. The corners of her mouth twitched, and Shi Yan's heart skipped a beat. She can't say that she wants to go to Konoha newspaper to be a secretary, right? If she says so, she will be returned. After thinking about it quickly, Shion replied. I just want to rest for a few days, and I've been feeling a little tired lately. Quote. The 3 generations immediately took out the fake note, signed their name, and then handed it to Shion, saying, I'll give you a few more days, your health is important. Quote. Mao Yu Shion has been diligent in the Dark Department in the past few years, and there is no reason to disagree with asking for leave. Speaking of the return to the company, yesterday when Yusha went to deliver the second section of the novel, This Killer Is Not Too Cold, to the editor-in-chief Okita, by the way, he told me that the print run of the newspaper today is a little more, not too much, just more than 20,000 or 30,000 copies. At that time, The editor-in-chief of Okita still didn't understand, but at noon, when the head of the distribution department at the bottom took his sales reports from yesterday and today, he was stunned for a moment. What's going on? Today's newsstand took nearly 120,000 copies of the newspaper from Maruzendo Tilda. Okita asked with some surprise. The head of the distribution department also nodded very excitedly, and said, I really didn't expect it. Yesterday's newspaper also sold nearly 100,000 copies, and the people of Maruzendo said that after many newsstand boards found that there was an extra novel column, the number of readers increased, so today I took a little more goods. This killer is not too cold. At that time, Yusha sent Okita a manuscript, and he was the first reader, and he felt good at the time, but he didn't expect that his sales would increase so much. After writing the third verse of This Killer is Not Too Cold, Yulu was thinking carefully about yesterday's events. Shion is almost labeled as a monitor in his place, so after she goes to work tomorrow, she really has to deal with it. After the 3 generations of the old man stared at him, he would definitely have other actions, so Yusha felt that he had to think of a perfect plan. Otherwise, if the old man suddenly attacked, he would really be difficult to deal with. You must know that dealing with an ordinary person in the Hokage's world, the huge Konoha village, is simply easy for the Hokage, the holder of the highest power. After thinking about it, Yusha felt that improving her reputation was a good solution. If you want to target a person of repute, even if the other party is the Hokage, you have to be cautious because of the subsequent effects. After all, most of this kind of people are of public concern. Of course, if it's for someone like Kamadanzo, it won't work at all to increase fame, but if it's 3 generations, it will have unexpected effects. Whether it's real or fake, at least on the surface, the 3 generations of Hokage have always maintained the character of a good man, and the entire Konoha village has always believed that the 3rd generation is a kind Hokage. Therefore, the 3 generations will be afraid of their own reputation when doing things. So Yusha decided to improve his reputation so that the 3 generations of Hokage would have some scruples, so that even if Yuyan had been watching by his side, he would feel at ease. If the best way to make a person ruined is through the media, then the fastest way to make a person famous is also through the media, and it is the best choice to shape one's image through the media. Yusha took his hand from his chin and loosened his somewhat stiff neck. Now he is the owner of Konoha newspaper, a real media tycoon, and it is very easy to shape his image. Konoha stood up, intending to find something to do. The last thing that is lacking in the entire Konoha newspaper is news, and the place with the most news is the press department. 2 minutes later, he had already run to the 2nd floor, standing at the door of the press department, and he pushed the door directly. Hello groan. All of a sudden, almost all the people who were still in the press department stood up and bowed respectfully to Yusha. Saito heard the movement, and quickly stood up from his workstation, walked quickly to Yunatsu's side, and bowed and greeted, Father, adult. Yunatsu nodded at Saito. Gotta be good. After straightening up, Saito hesitated and asked, Lord, do you have any instructions for coming here? Oh, I'm just here to take a look. Yusha touched the bridge of his nose and said, Saito, you sent you the draft for the 2nd review for me to read, I want to know about it. Okay, come with me. Saito made a, please, gesture and motion for Yuna to come with him. The 2 of them came to Saito's workstation, and Saito handed Yusha more than a dozen drafts that had been prepared. Looking at the past one by one, Yusha's interest is lacking, and these second-instance manuscripts given to him by Saito seem boring to him. The content of the news is not only ordinary, but the expression is still so formula-templated. It seems that they have to teach them how to be a headline party, how to make up nonsense, and write ordinary things attractively. It wasn't until he saw the 7th manuscript that his eyes suddenly lit up. Chapter 71. Although the title of this news article is quite boring, Katsu found out that there is a breaking point behind it. He read the whole news from beginning to end with great interest, and his mind was running rapidly. This news is about a shinobi who died unexpectedly during a mission a few years ago, leaving a mother and daughter to live, because the recent life situation is not very good, and the former teammates of the middle ninja helped to help. In fact, this news may seem very ordinary to others. After all, there are many such families in Konoha. Even in peacetime, the probability of doing a mission to receive a bento is still very high. After all, ninja is a high-risk profession. Take the highest wage, do the most dangerous work, refers to ninjas. In the mission, if someone is going to die, the other ninjas will choose to help their families out of morality or kindness. In Konoha, this situation is not rare. Such as Matekai, it stands to reason that as an elite ninja, he should have more savings than red beans. But the reality is the opposite, and this is largely because Kai uses his income to help others. Of course, Kai will spend so much money to help others, in addition to his helpfulness. More importantly, he is a bachelor, he eats the whole family without hunger, and he has no hobbies except exercise. Minister Saito, how many 293 news of this type are there in a month? Yusha suddenly took out the 7th draft and handed it to Saito, who was waiting on the side. Saito took the manuscript and scanned it at a glance to get a rough idea. He didn't quite know what Yusha meant, so he pondered it for a while before speaking. Lord, this kind of news is actually very common, and there were 4 articles in total last month. But you said yesterday that you want to carry out layout rectification, so you plan to report on this article this month. Is there anything that needs to be rectified in this draft? Yusha nodded, then took the manuscript from Saito's hand again, raised his eyebrows and asked, haven't you ever thought about digging up the story behind the news? What's the story behind it? Saito looked at Yunatsu with a puzzled expression. Isn't it ordinary news about a good deed? Looks like I'm going to have to give you some training. Yusha interrupted Saito's words, took the manuscript rolled into a paper tube and slapped his palms, speechless for a while. Maybe they didn't know what sublimation theme was, so they almost didn't mention the material behind the news. After all, the news on this Biffy theme has been reported so many times, and it is still like this so far, and it is estimated that it is already a solidified thinking. Frowning, Yusha was thinking about finding a time to hold a private meeting with the staff of the press department to teach them how to write a piece of news. As the main force of the Konoha newspaper, if the press department does not know how to write a news release, even if Yusha reforms the layout of the Konoha Daily, and the quality of the manuscript is not good, then after the newspaper's sales reach a small peak, it will stop rising as before and maintain a baseline. This news Yusha believes that there is a need to dig deeper, because the status of the entire 5 countries is not low, and the income is also very high. In Konoha village, an ordinary resident will probably be about 30,000 taels a month. Of course, if you have special skills or heavy physical strength, your income will increase. The income of a ninja, even if it is logically speaking, the money saved by a middle ninja for a few years on a mission, a mother and daughter live for a long time. If the situation is good, you cannot work for the rest of your life. How can you live as well as ordinary residents, and even fall to the point of relying on others to help? Is it that this mother and daughter are too extravagant, or the dead Zongnan did not leave most of the property? If it is the former, then the mother and daughter are to blame, but if it is the latter, then the whereabouts of Zongnan's money are worth studying. Is this an isolated case, or is it a common situation? And Yusha also found a very interesting phenomenon, and looked down at the newspaper again, although it was only a draft, but after all, this is the second trial, and there are pictures on it. There is also a somewhat familiar girl in that photo, with a feminine and soft smile, and the princess's long hair. Isn't this the Kionji who once fought with her at the campus festival? Yusha is really getting more and more interested in this news. Minister Saito, I'm going to dig up this news again. You can write me the address, and at the same time give me the style of a reporter. Yusha pointed to the manuscript in his hand and commanded. Oh, okay. Saito immediately removed a piece of paper from the table, wrote down an address twice, handed it to Yuna, and then said with some anxiety, Lord, is it really okay for you to go alone? Do you want me to send you an assistant? Bang bang bang. There were 3 knocks at the door, interrupting Saito's words, and then Yutsuki Shion pushed the door in, and when he saw Yusha, his eyes lit up. and he hurriedly stepped forward and said, "Lord, I'll report." Quote. In fact, Mao Yuxian was supposed to go to work tomorrow, but after taking leave, she thought about it carefully and decided to come today. After all, she belongs to the dark department, and there are not many holidays, so it is the right thing to find out who the author of Konoha Love Story, and This Killer Is Not Too Cold, as soon as possible. Ah, don't you see this assistant is coming? Yusha raised her head with a smile and said to Xian, "You will accompany me to visit a family in a while, I need your help." Quote. Xian nodded and said, "Yes." Saito prepared a set of cameras for Yunatsu and Yuyan, 2 Konoha newspaper press cards, and by the way, he took 2 notebooks and 2 pens, and then the 2 of them went on the road. Because the camera was too bulky, Xian took on the heavy responsibility of carrying equipment as a secretary. The 2 men followed the address on the note and went to the residential area on the east side of the village. Yusha looked up at the house in front of him, and the word, Matsumoto, was written on the door. This is an ordinary house, although it is not as big as the gate in Konoha village, but it should be of the medium level in the village. Groan, shall I knock on the door? Yuyan leaned the camera against the wall and turned around to ask Yunatsu. Yusha nodded and motioned for Yuyan to knock on the door. Xian took 2 steps forward, then stepped forward to knock on the door, and after a while, a woman in her 30s pushed open the door and said with a tired face, "Who is it?" Taking out the press card of the Konoha newspaper, Xian said, "Hello Mrs. Matsumoto, we are reporters from the Konoha newspaper, can I take a little time to visit you?" Chapter 72. Is there anything wrong? Mrs. Matsumoto looked at the 2 people in front of her with some confusion. Why did the previous reporter not leave for a long time? Why did 2 more come? Xian replied, "That's right, we want to interview you." Quote. Matsumoto was a little reluctant to Xian's request, and she didn't have time to busy herself with her own business after the interview in the morning, but after thinking about it, she turned sideways, and said reluctantly, "I still have work to do, so I can't spare too much time." It's okay, it's enough for a while. Seeing that the other party was a little reluctant, he still agreed to be interviewed. Yusha immediately took the flower head, and with Xian, the 2 of them walked into the living room of Matsumoto's house one after the other. During this time, Yusha has been observing each other. Mrs. Matsumoto is dressed very neatly, but it can be seen that it is cheap old clothes. The house is clean, the furniture decoration and the like are very simple, not like a lavish spending people. When I went in, I found that there was a bowl of rice on the table that had not yet begun to move, and only a small plate of plums as a side dish, and it was obvious that the economic situation was indeed precarious. "Sit down, you 2, and I'll pack my things." Quote. Mrs. Matsumoto saw Yuyan and Yusha standing, and quickly squatted down to put away the plums and rice on the table, and with a flash of embarrassment on her face, she stood up and sent her lunch back to the kitchen. When Yusha saw that Mrs. Matsumoto's expression was a little wrong, she felt that she seemed to be a little ill-considered. It was noon, and he and Shi Yan came to interview rashly, directly interrupting her lunch time. Before leaving the Konoha newspaper office, Minister Saito briefly taught Yunatsu and Yuyan how to use the camera. In this interview, Xian's main task is to take pictures, and Yusha is responsible for asking and recording till the records. "Let's have some water, both of you." Mrs. Matsumoto walked out of the kitchen with 2 cups of tea, then placed the cups in front of Yusha and Xian, and sat down on the empty sofa after saying, "Be careful of burning." Yusha and Xian said thank you at the same time. Glancing at the 2 reporters, Mrs. Matsumoto rubbed her temples, relaxed, and took the lead in speaking. "What else do you need to interview? Didn't someone from your newspaper come to interview this morning?" Turning the pen in his hand, Yusha sorted out his thoughts, and directly asked the other party about the expenses and the like, without explaining the reason, which seemed very abrupt and a little impolite. So, he had to use a topic to guide Mrs. Matsumoto. With a roll of his eyes, Yusha took the pen and clicked the notebook twice, and then said to Mrs. Matsumoto, "Mrs. Matsumoto is like this, Konoha has many families like you, and life is more difficult. Therefore, Our newspaper would like to do a survey to find out where the bulk of each family's expenses lies. After the investigation, our newspaper recently wanted to report a fundraiser to help more people. Shion felt that her brain was a little short-circuited, and the camera in her hand was a little unstable. Didn't she and Yusha come out to interview the Matsumoto family? After hearing Yusha's intentions, Mrs. Matsumoto took a slight breath, glanced back at the photos placed on the counter, and said, "The highest cost of our mother and daughter is in Chihime. By the way, my daughter went to school today. She is not at home. She is a very cute little girl." Quote. Yusha remembered the bear child and got goosebumps. Maybe Mrs. Matsumoto didn't know that her daughter was jealous at school for being stunned. Turning the pen in his hand, Yusha didn't say much about Chihime, but was very interested in the tuition fees of the ninja school, and he continued to ask, "Is the cost of the ninja school very high?" Alas, Mrs. Matsumoto frowned and sighed deeply, and then complained, "Only Class S is free of charge in the ninja school, and that class is a special enrollment except for the big family, so all of them are free. However, other classes have to charge tuition, and the cost of ordinary classes at ninja schools is more than twice as expensive as ordinary schools." Quote. This shocked Yusha very much. She didn't expect the tuition of the ordinary class of the ninja school to be so expensive. If it was really an ordinary family, it was really a little stressful. Quickly jotting down the matter about the tuition fees in the notebook, Yusha raised his head again and asked, "Mrs. Matsumoto, in addition to your daughter's tuition, do you have any other high expenses in your family?" Shaking her head, Mrs. Matsumoto said, "There are no others." Quote. The highest consumption of the family is the expenditure of the daughter's tuition, which is in line with Yusha's observation just now. Mrs. Matsumoto is not the kind of woman who spends money indiscriminately. On the contrary, she is very frugal. Ask for flowers. Regarding Mrs. Matsumoto's interview, Yusha felt that this was basically the end of it, but before leaving, he asked for the address of Matsumoto's former teammate, Yoshikawa's family, and planned to go to Yoshikawa for an interview later. Coming out of Matsumoto's house, the two of them stood on the street. Yuyan carried the camera, and asked, "Shall we go to Mr. Matsumoto's former teammate's house next?" Yusha shook his head, fixed his eyes on a house next to the Matsumoto family, and then said, "Wait and go to his teammate's house. Let's interview the neighbors of the Matsumoto family first." Quote. The neighbor of Matsumoto's house, an old lady in her 60s, immediately invited the two to her home after hearing about Yusha and Yuyan's intentions. The old lady had already eaten, and after Yusha sat down and exchanged a few polite words with her, she began to interview, "Grandma, how are the usual expenses of Mrs. Matsumoto's family? Isn't her husband a shinobi?" After hearing this, the old lady sighed, shook her head with some pity in her reading glasses, and said, "I don't know the specific situation. Mrs. Matsumoto is a shrewd and capable woman, usually very frugal, and she doesn't buy herself a new dress for a year." Quote. "Ah, that's right." Yusha nodded, and then asked a little strangely, "Does Mrs. Matsumoto have a job?" "There is no specific job," said the old lady, shaking her head again, "but she usually goes to work part-time, doing odd jobs." Quote. Yusha chatted with the old lady a few more words, and then the two of them got up and went to Mr. Yoshikawa's house. Fortunately he had no task recently, so he took it with him at home. Yoshikawa is almost 40 years old this year, and he is already a shinobi at present, and after listening to Yusha and Shion's intentions, he frowned. He didn't really want to accept this kind of interview. Yusha saw that Yoshikawa was a little impatient, and immediately said, "Mr. Yoshikawa, we just ask a few simple questions, and we won't delay your time too much. If you encounter a question that you don't want to answer in the process of talking, you don't have to answer it." Quote. The Konoha newspaper has a very high status in the entire Konoha village, and almost everyone will sell face, and Yoshikawa doesn't want to offend the people of the Konoha newspaper, so after thinking about it, he nodded and accepted it. Chapter 73. He was the only one in the Yoshikawa family, and after the three of them entered the living room together, he waved his hand and beckoned the two to sit down, and said, "If you two have questions, You can ask them directly, and I will try to answer questions that do not involve principles. Quote. Yusha glanced at Yoshikawa, and immediately understood that he was a straightforward character, so he didn't beat around the bush and asked straight to the point. Mr. Yoshikawa, I want to know about Mr. Matsumoto's ninja experience, don't you know if it's convenient to reveal? There is nothing to hide about this issue. Yoshikawa pondered for a moment and began to introduce Matsumoto. From graduating from ninja school to Matsumoto's unexpected death in the mission, he has been a ninja for a total of 15 years, 5 years of lower ninja and 10 years of middle ninja, but unfortunately his talent is limited, and his strength is stuck in the middle and upper level of the middle ninja and cannot be improved. 15 years of ninja life. Yusha quickly wrote it down in his notebook, and then looked up and asked a question he was most concerned about. Mr. Yoshikawa, did Matsumoto spend a lot of money when he was a ninja? Or bad habits, such as gambling, drinking flower wine, etc.? How is that possible? Regarding Yusha's question, Yoshikawa frowned and immediately retorted loudly, a little unhappy. Matsumoto and I are from the same class. The two of us have been doing tasks together for more than 10 years. He has always lived very economically, and he is a good man. He often goes to help the poor families in the village. What kind of gambling? Drinking flowers? He can't do this kind of thing at all. Seeing Yoshikawa's excited look, Yusha hurriedly said, Mr. Yoshikawa, don't be excited, I don't mean anything else. Quote. Yoshikawa, who calmed down, also noticed that he seemed to be out of shape, and although the other party was a reporter from the Konoha newspaper, he was just a child. Patted his head with some remorse, and Yoshikawa apologized sullenly. I lost my temper just now. I just don't want Matsumoto to be misunderstood. He used to save me. Forget it, you continue to ask. In fact, the interview is almost here. Yusha coughed, stood up and said, Mr. Yoshikawa, thank you very much for accepting our interview. I won't bother after I finish asking my question. Quote. Shion also quickly stood up, put the camera down, and stood behind Yusha, ready to leave at any time. Ah, it can't be that I scared you just now, right? Yoshikawa also quickly stood up and said with some embarrassment, although I have a bit of a temper, I am a good person. The corners of his mouth twitched, and a common saying immediately appeared in Yusha's mind. Wangpo sells melons, sells herself and boasts. This is the first time I have heard someone say that she is a good person. No, Mr. Yoshikawa, you may have misunderstood, but I'm really just here to do a simple interview. Yusha also looked at the watch on the wall and said, and it's not early, I've been out with Shion for an interview for half a day, and I have to rush back to write the manuscript. Quote. Ah, that's right. Yoshikawa nodded, and there was no embarrassment on his face, and said, then I'll send you two out. Quote. After interviewing Mrs. Matsumoto, the old lady, and Yoshigo, Yusha and Yuyan rushed back to the Konoha newspaper office, and the two of them entered the office together. Sitting at the desk, Yusha spread out the book, and then began to calculate, and there were words on his lips. 5 years of lower forbearance, 10 years of middle forbearance. Turning the pen, Yusha looked at the numbers on the note, a little puzzled. The income of the lower ninja is roughly calculated as 100,000 taels a month, and the income of the middle ninja is a decent tael, which is 42 million taels in 15 years. Yoshikawa said that Matsumoto was a very frugal man, and he also passed through other people. A man, when he has a family, always has to leave money to subsidize the family. No matter how kind-hearted he is, it is not too much to leave half of it, right? In this way, the Matsumoto family should have 21 million taels, and probably more than that. An ordinary person's salary is only 30,000 taels per month, which is enough for the daily expenses of an ordinary family, and the living expenses for 15 years are only 5 or 6 million. So, where did the Yoshikawa family's money go? Frowning, Yusha really couldn't figure it out. The money couldn't be gone. Shiyan fiddled with the camera in her hand, also frowning. Originally she was following Yusha to make soy sauce, but now she is interested in this matter. Looking up and glancing at Yusha's accounts, Shion was even more puzzled. A ninja family, even if it didn't have a husband, wouldn't have a living standard drop so much in a few years. Where did the money go, leaving a mother and daughter living so hard? Now that he has taken over, Yusha must get things to the bottom of the matter. He tapped his finger on the table, then raised his head and instructed Yuyan, Shion, you go to the press department, find Minister Saito, and ask him for news about the living conditions of the ninja's family after death. Remember to ask for all of them. By the way, give the camera to the press department and ask them to pick out the photos that can be used. Quote. About half an hour later, Shi Yan entered the office with a thick pile of news. Yusha looked at the news that was nearly 20 centimeters high, and couldn't help but cover her eyes with her hands. This is too much, right? With a bang, Shion stacked all the newspapers on Yusha's 823 desk, then raised his hand to wipe his sweat, and said, I'm tired to death, Lord Gro. There are about more than 200 newspapers here. Since the Konoha newspaper was published, all the news about the life of the ninja's family after death is there, and I went to the warehouse with Minister Saito to get it just now. Quote. Some of the news was published recently and looked very neat, but some of it was already charred and looked old. It is estimated that in a few more years, it can be placed directly in the exhibition hall on the first floor. Hard work. Yusha hurriedly said, then handed Shi Yan a notebook and a pen and said, the two of us will check these related types, and it is best to classify them. Quote. For convenience, Yusha and Shion's desks are just opposite. Since the two of them came back, they have been checking the relevant newspapers, reading and recording them one by one. It wasn't until the sun was sinking that the two stopped. Rubbing her somewhat sore arm, Shion handed the information she had sorted out to Yusha and said, Lord, I've got it here. Quote. Yusha took the notebook and began to browse in a hurry, and the content of Shion's record was similar to his. Except for those who received a bento as soon as they became a ninja, most ninjas should have saved a lot of money. Chapter 74. But most of their families are like the Matsumoto family, living in very poverty, even as ordinary people. Yusha narrowed her eyes. This part of the family obviously didn't get the savings that should have been left, otherwise it wouldn't have been so miserable. The money is earned by ninjas risking their lives, and Konoha village will never deduct the income of ninja missions, and they are settled immediately after completing the tasks, so what is the truth? What is the unsightly thing in it? Suddenly there was a burst of birdsong outside the window. Yusha looked away from the notebook and looked out the window. The sunset has dyed the sky red. There are more pedestrians on the street. It's very lively. The clock hanging on the wall was almost 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Rubbing his temples, Yusha looked at the newspapers piled in front of him and the notebooks spread out on the table. He had been busy all day, and he really didn't want to move. And if you continue to investigate, you will definitely have to put a lot of effort into it. This matter is not so simple at all, and it is not something that can be figured out by working overtime. Lord, what should we do next? Shion asked a little strangely as he saw that Yusha had put down the notebook and had no instructions for the next step at all. Stretching his waist, Yusha looked up at Shion, smiled and said, Shion, you have worked hard today. This is the end of the matter, and we can stop the investigation on our side. Quote. What? Stop investigating? Shion slapped the table in surprise and said in disbelief, how can you stop investigating the Matsumoto family, don't you care? Suddenly, Shi Yan clenched his fists tightly, straightened up, and said, Elder, I'm sorry, I was rude just now. Quote. Through this day's work, Shion has almost forgotten what she came here for. She is also a ninja. The life savings of her dead colleague are almost gone, and her colleague's family is living in hardship, and this situation is not only one, she must want to find out. If things don't get to the bottom of the matter, this situation will definitely continue to occur. Therefore, she was so emotional just now that she offended her boss. Yusha naturally knew this. He waved his hand and said, It's okay, I understand. But don't be impatient. I just said that we won't investigate. but I didn't say that this matter will end here, and we can let the masses investigate. Quote. What kind of people are coming to check? Xian didn't understand very much, she asked with some confusion. With a mysterious smile, Yo Sha said leisurely, you'll know tomorrow, we're a newspaper. Quote. It was too early to figure out the time, so Yusha immediately picked up the manuscript paper and began to write the press release. In the manuscript, he added the data he calculated today, and then used Mr. Yoshikawa's relief of the Matsumoto family to introduce how miserable most of the widows and orphans were. It's not bad, so it's very sensational to write this kind of news. At 4:30, Yusha finally finished the manuscript, rubbed the somewhat sore one, and he reviewed the manuscript again with great satisfaction, and then got up and said to Xian, You are here, I will go find the editor-in-chief Yamada. Quote. When I came to Ryosuke Yamada's office, I drank tea leisurely, and I just waited for the typesetting to be finished and sent for printing, and then I could get off work. Lord Grow. Seeing Yusha come in, he immediately stood up and said hello, looking at the manuscript in his hand. Yamada was puzzled for a while. Didn't today's, this killer is not too cold, be sent over in the morning? Well, Yusha walked up to Yamada, then handed him the manuscript and instructed, you add this manuscript and then take it to printing. By the way, put this news on the front page, with the most conspicuous headline. Quote. This is. Yamada took the manuscript very puzzled, then quickly flipped through it, then widened his eyes, and said, Lord, do you want to? That's right, Yusha nodded, just do as I say. Quote. Some of them smiled profoundly. Yusha just wanted to start the fishing boat through the newspaper, publicize this matter, and mobilize the emotions of the masses, and then someone would naturally investigate this matter. Yuyan Village is located at the intersection of the borders of the land country, the land of wind, and the land of fire, and Xiaonan set off immediately after deciding to go to Konoha Village to investigate Yusha in person. Kakato came to the border of the Fire Nation early, waiting for Xiaonan. After the two people converged, they immediately accelerated their speed and ran towards Konoha Village. The two of them were very fast. They met at noon, and they rushed to Konoha Village in the evening. After the two of them registered, they found a hotel in the center of Konoha Village and stayed there. Xiaonan sat in front of the book table in the hotel, holding his chin with his hand, and a pair of light orange eyes were curiously looking at the people downstairs. A breeze blew outside the window, blowing away the blue-purple hair in front of Xiaonan's forehead, and the lilac paper flowers made a slight sound, which was a wonderful feeling. She has been staying in Yuyan Village. She has not stepped out of that rainy place for several years, and she seems to have been a little out of touch with society. Looking up at Taishia slightly, Xiaonan sighed for a while. How long has she not seen such a beautiful scenery? However, Xiaonan still understood her mission here, and with a wink, she took her hand away from her chin, and then turned her head to look at the stacked magazines, books, and newspapers of the past 2 days on the desk, which the inn was meant to read for guests to read when they were bored. Xiaonan picked up the newspapers of the past 2 days and wanted to know what important things had happened in Konoha Village in the past 2 days. First took out yesterday's newspaper, because there was plenty of time, so Xiaonan read it very carefully, and almost understood what happened in Konoha yesterday, King Mo's situation. She pouted a little boredly, and couldn't help but think. Konoha Village is really a relatively peaceful village, and most of the reports are just trivial things. Turning to the last page, Xiaonan's eyes lit up. It turned out to be a novel column, full of pages, all of which were, "This killer is not too cold." She didn't hurry to see the end, but suddenly saw, "To be continued." Frowning her eyebrows, Xiaonan happened to see Leon's tangled place, and she really wanted to know the plot behind. Immediately took out today's Konoha Daily, and Xiaonan immediately continued to read. After a while, Xiaonan fell in. She guessed correctly. Leon really opened the door. He saved the little girl. Seeing this, she couldn't help but raise the corners of her mouth, feeling very happy. It's good that Matilda was at her most dangerous, and someone came to her rescue and kept her alive. Chapter 75. Matilda entered Leon's room, and the moment the door was closed, her heart was still pounding, as if it were about to burst through her chest. Putting the milk in the kitchen fridge, Matilda returned to the living room and sat down, tears on her face like beads of broken threads, and her whole body shrunk into a small ball. Leon was worried that the group of ninjas would find out the identity of the little girl, and he kept restlessly staring at the door, holding the kunai tightly in his hand behind his back, ready to fight at any time. Half an hour later, it was finally quiet outside, and the group was gone. Leon also relaxed. He walked into the living room, looked at Matilda, who was still crying uncontrollably, sat down, and said sullenly, "You hate your parents, why are you crying?" "Yes, their lives and deaths have nothing to do with me, but the damned ones killed my brother. He was the only one who was good to me, and he was so young," Matilda said with a choked voice, hatred in her eyes. Reading this, Xiao Nan's heart was slightly touched and slightly distracted. No one is born to die, but the weak are passive at all times, which is an eternal truth. 293 pursed the corners of his lips. Xiao Nan's eyes flashed sadness. If they were strong enough, would the result be different? Leon was silent, then went into the kitchen, and after a few minutes took out a simple meal, laid it on the table in the living room, poured 2 glasses of milk, and put one in front of Matilda, and said sullenly, "Eat quickly, when you are full, you can leave here." Quote. Spreading her hands, Matilda said, "I have nowhere to go, you can't drive me away." Quote. Leon took a sip of milk, bowed his head, and said, "Don't you have any other relatives?" "I mean, you have to go." Quote. "If you let me go now, you will send me to death, and you will not save me at all," Matilda said. The two men had a long and intense discussion, but in the end Leon was defeated, and he agreed to live here for the little girl. The room was left to Matilda, and Leon sat down on the couch to sleep. When Matilda was asleep, Leon suddenly stood up. He took out a short knife from his ninja box, gently pushed open the bedroom door. The blade of the short knife glowed in the moonlight, and he gently placed it under the little girl's snow-white neck. What does Leon want to do? Xiao Nan couldn't help but exclaim after reading this. She frowned and said, he shouldn't kill Matilda. Quote. The truth is, as Xiao Nan thought, Leon didn't succeed in the end. He returned to the sofa in frustration, and ravaged his head fiercely. He is a killer. How can he leave a stranger? This will disrupt his life. But early the next morning, Leon opened the curtains as usual, placed his favorite plant on the balcony, and went to prepare today's breakfast, and half an hour later, the two of them sat together to start today's breakfast. After eating, Matilda put her hands on her and said with a serious face, "Leon, teach me to kill, I want revenge." Quote. Glancing up at Matilda, Leon shook his head for a moment, and said, "No, you can't." Quote. I'm going to kill those people with my own hands, and they killed my brother. Matilda leaned forward and said eagerly, "In exchange, I can wash and clean for you." Shaking his head again, Leon refused. Matilda looked at Leon, suddenly took a gun out of Leon's box, quickly got up and ran to the window, and started shooting in the street. Bang, bang, bang. The second quarter is over. Xiao Nan looked at the last, to be continued, with some distraction, and couldn't help but think. What is a gun? After reading the author's description of gun, Biffy again, Xiao Nan nodded knowingly. The gun is a weapon like a crossbow, but the gun is not launched by the ejection force, but by the thrust generated by the explosion of gunpowder, and the same bullet should be an arrow, without an arrow body. In the world of the Hokage, there are fireworks. Fireworks are a piece of gunpowder wrapped into a ball. The gunpowder explosion pushes the ball into the sky, and then the ball explodes into fireworks, and the principle between the two is similar. After thinking of fireworks, Xiao Nan immediately understood. Xiao Nan liked the novel. This killer is not too cold, very much, so she wanted to see what interesting things would happen in the third verse. Directly took a bunch of books. Xiao Nan began to rummage through the Konoha Daily, but after reading them all, he didn't find the latest issue of the newspaper. Frowning, Xiao Nan took out the newspaper she had just read, and saw that the time turned out to be today's date, That is, what she was holding in her hand was the latest issue of Konoha Daily. If she wanted to continue to look down, she could only wait until tomorrow. His fingers tapped lightly on the desk twice, and Xiaonan pondered for a while. According to her and Kakuto's ability, it shouldn't take too long to check on someone in Konoha village, and if you leave Konoha early, you need to find someone to bring a newspaper. This killer is not too cold, has a lot of sections that have not been written, and she finally found a book that she is interested in reading, and she really doesn't want to break. Knock knock. Just when Xiaonan was thinking about how to find someone to deliver her newspaper, there were suddenly 3 knocks at the door, and she immediately came back to her senses and got up to open the door. At this time, the one who knocked on her door should be Jiaodu. Kakuto didn't go back to the room immediately after checking in just now, but went out and went to a very hidden casino in Konoha village. After so many years of development, the power of the black market has become very large, and there are also secret branches stationed in Konoha village, but there is no rampant in other places, and most of the work is to collect intelligence. When he arrived at the black market, Kakuto went directly to the person in charge and gave him a sum of money to help him inquire about a person named Yaxia. The steward counted the money in his hand, nodded contentedly, and then sent his horns away. Yusha is not a well-known ninja. He used to do some errand tasks, but there are millions of people in the huge Konoha village, so he can't attract the attention of the black market at all. Although it is a little difficult to find the person, Yuna, among millions of people, the horn just now provided them with a very important clue. That is, not long ago, this person named Yunatsu teamed up with Kakashi, Matekai, and Azuki on a mission, and the task was to rescue the son of the big businessman Eiichiro Saruta. As long as they start from this point, it will be easy for them to find Yusha. Chapter 76. After opening the door, it was indeed Kakuto standing outside. Xiaonan looked at him and asked softly, "What news did you bring back?" "Just now I went to the black market branch hidden in Konoha village, and gave them a large sum of money and some news to help them find someone. After all, the two of us are not very convenient to move." When Kakuto replied, he especially accentuated the words, "a large sum of money." Xiaonan nodded and said, "Is there anything else?" Before the corners finished speaking, there was a bang, and the door was directly closed by Xiaonan, leaving the expressionless corners staring at the door panel. Early the next morning, Xian got up early in the morning, and she was still worried about yesterday's events, and she wanted to know what it meant to let the masses tune 293 to find out. But when Xian pushed open the door of Yusha's office, he was confused. The inside was empty, and Yusha was not there. The corners of her mouth twitched, and Xian knew that she was early, and it was estimated that the adult was still sleeping at this time. Xian walked to her place a little dejected. If Yusha didn't come, she didn't know what she should do first. On the streets of Konoha in the early morning, there is no shortage of pedestrians. Asma, as usual, went to the newsstand to buy the daily Konoha newspaper of the day, planning to continue reading, "This Killer Is Not Too Cold." The plot of "This Killer Is Not Too Cold" yesterday really made Asma a little stunned, because he felt that Leon, a cold killer, would not open the door for Matilda, even if he had helped to buy milk before. What surprised Asma even more was that Leon not only saved Matilda's life, but also took in her, and he couldn't bear to kill her when he was in the evening. Putting the money in the place designated by the newsstand owner, Asma let out a long sigh, and he finally understood why this novel was called "This Killer Is Not Too Cold." Sitting in the soba restaurant, Asma finished watching the 3rd episode of "This Killer Is Not Too Cold," while waiting for the boss to make noodles. He had a different opinion of Matilda, who thought the little girl was a troublemaker, but Leon became interesting because of her intrusion. Before the soba noodles were ready, Asma, bored, flipped to the first page of the newspaper to see what trivial things had happened in the village recently, just to pass the time. However, when Asma flipped to the front page of Konoha Daily, he was slightly stunned when he saw the first news, and the news headline was not short. "What kind of life does their family have for the ninjas who sacrificed their lives for the village?" Touching his chin, Asma was a little puzzled. this kind of news is usually placed in the second or third. How did it become the headline today? Ma usually pays more attention to the news related to ninjas, so he started to read it, but the further he went, the tighter his brow became, and he couldn't help but slam his head on the table when he saw the end. This is exactly the news reported by Yusha yesterday, talking about the life of the families of the dead ninjas, and the most intuitive part of it is not the sensational drama of helping each other before putting the money straight on the surface. Asma couldn't help but recalculate the number given by Yusha, and now it is really as the news said, some families' accounts do not match at all. Hey, Asma, your noodles. The soba owner brought the noodles to Asma, and then said curiously, is Leon doing something unreasonable again? I haven't had time to buy today's newspaper yet. Quote. Shaking her head gloomily, Asma said, no, boss, take a look at the first news item in today's newspaper. Quote. Huh. The boss took the newspaper with some confusion, and then read it quickly, and at the end of the reading he raised his head in shock, looked at Asma with an incredulous gaze, and said, this is 8 or 9 is not far from 10, it should be true. Asma said in a very unhappy mood, not against anyone, and he was very angry when he thought that his teammates who had fought side by side with him could not live in peace after their families could not live in peace. Asma frowned, picked up the chopsticks and hurriedly started eating noodles. This matter must be investigated. At the same time, many ninjas who like to get up early to eat and buy newspapers have also seen this news, and they are also very angry when they know the problems involved. Today, I don't know the fire Genma, Yamashiro Aoba, and the same foot because I have to be on duty together, so I made an appointment to eat together at a restaurant. After the three of them had eaten and drunk enough, they didn't rush to the Hokage building. After all, it was still very early for them to go to work, so they sat in their seats and chatted. I don't know that Huo Genma usually has the she of reading, and the three of them chatted for a while, and when he glanced at it, he saw the newspaper on the table for the guests to read, and picked it up casually. Yamashiro Aoba saw the actions of Shiranui Genma, and couldn't help but laugh and said, I'll go, you're really studious. Rolling his eyes at Yamashiro Aoba, he said leisurely without knowing the fire, I am concerned about the development of the village. The first news article in the Konoha Daily was about the living situation of the ninja's widow, so the first news that I didn't know that Genma read was also this, and the more I looked down, the worse his face became. Genma, what's wrong with you? And the same head was the first to notice that something was wrong with Genma, and immediately asked. Shiranui Genma took a deep breath, then pushed the Konoha Daily in front of the two of them and said, you two take a look at the first news. Quote. Yamashiro Aoba 5.8, and looked at each other in unison, and the two of them rarely saw this kind of expression without knowing the fire Genma, and they quickly picked up the newspaper and read it. When I finished reading it, Yamashiro Aoba and the same foot were shocked. Yamashiro Aoba said, this can't be possible, right? Who dares to make ghosts on the family of the ninjas in our village? And Yamashiro Aoba interrupted Yamashiro Aoba in unison. Don't forget, these are the families of the ninja who passed away. Quote. Yamashiro Aoba was silent. Clenching his fists tightly, he said without knowing the fire, although the Konoha Daily likes to report on trivial matters, they never report fake news. If that's true, then it's a big deal. Quote. He nodded in unison, suddenly stood up and said, or, while it's not time to go to work, let's investigate first. Chapter 77. I don't know that Huo Genma and Yamashiro Aoba also quickly stood up and nodded very seriously, this matter must be investigated. Because the newspaper mainly talked about the Matsumoto family, the three of them came over after some inquiry. It's a pity that Mrs. Matsumoto is not at home, and it is Chihime Matsumoto who comes to open the door. A crack in the door was opened slightly, and Chihime walked out and looked at the three shinobi standing in front of her house a little strangely, and whispered, Hello uncles, is there anything wrong? Senheim looked at Chihime for a moment, then crouched down to meet her eye level and asked, Little girl, is your mother at home? I want to ask her for some questions. Quote. My mom isn't at home, she's out to work part-time, I can tell you if there's any problem, but I'll have to wait until I get back from school, and I'll be going to school in a while. Quote. After Chihime finished speaking, a trace of impatience flashed in her eyes, but it was well hidden, and she didn't know that Uogenma, Yamashiro Aoba, and the similarities didn't find it. Yamashiro Aoba pushed his eyes, and immediately grasped the point. He lowered his head and asked Chihime, "Does your mother often go out to work so early?" Nodding 18, Chihime pursed her lips and was silent for a while before she spoke. "Because my mother has to provide for me to go to school, it's usually very hard. If the uncles have nothing else to do, I'll go back to my room for dinner. I'm afraid I'll be late for school for a while." Quote. Ah. Okay. Study she hard. Ignorant Fire Genma couldn't help but touch Chihime's soft long hair, and then stood up. Seeing the three ninjas walk out of their yard, Chihime pursed her lips, not so well behaved. This is the third group of ninjas to come to her house this morning, and the hell knows how many more. She has to hurry up and go to school after eating. She doesn't want to be questioned by a bunch of people she doesn't know. The three of them walked out of Matsumoto's house. Several people looked at each other, and they all saw the heaviness in each other's eyes. Through what Chihime said just now, at least they had determined that the living standard of this family was really not very good, and the only adult was going to work in the early morning, leaving the little girl to eat alone. Gritting his teeth, he beckoned to Uogenma and said, let's go to a few other houses. There are many such families in Konoha village, and the three of them directly mobilized chakra to investigate other families as quickly as possible. After nearly an hour and a half of investigation, the three of them walked to more than a dozen households, and found that the content of the Konoha Daily Report was completely true, and even some families were worse than what was written in the newspaper, and there was a ninja's widow who was seriously ill because she had to work to earn money to support her family, and if it weren't for the help of the ninja's former teammates, their family's life would basically not be able to go on. There is almost no fake news in the world of Hokage, which is completely different from modern times. Because there are too many out of context and indiscriminate news on the modern internet, netizens will let it fly on the internet for a while to see if there is any reversal. There is a high level of trust in the newspaper, and there is a large official newspaper company, the Konoha newspaper, which founded the Konoha Daily, which controls the direction of the fishing boats throughout the village, which is quite official. Under the influence of the Konoha Daily, questions about the life of the ninja's family after their death quickly caught the attention of the people in the village. The impact and spread of this incident far exceeded Yusha's prediction. In fact, the main reason is that this time it was explosive, mobilized the enthusiasm of a large number of people who eat melons, and gave them a talking point, and today the newspaper was sold out because of this incident, which has never happened since the establishment of the Konoha newspaper. Mr. Takagi, the president of an inn in Konoha, opened the door of his office at work today, and saw that Miyaki was reading a newspaper instead of greeting him. Closing the door casually, Mr. Takagi walked up to Miyaki very strangely, clicked the table and asked, "Miyaki, what are you looking at?" Huh. Miyaki was stunned for a moment, and when he turned his head and saw that it was Mr. Takagi, he immediately stood up in a panic, bowed to him, and said, "President, I'm sorry. I was a little fascinated by the newspaper just now, so I..." "It's okay." Mr. Takagi shook his head, and then said, "I haven't read today's newspaper yet, what's wrong?" Miyaki immediately handed the newspaper on his desk to Takagi, and said excitedly, "President, this time the Konoha Daily broke a big news." Not caring about Miyaki's tone, Takagi took the Konoha Daily, and began to read it. The more he read it, the tighter his brows wrinkled, and at the end of the reading, he shook his head, put the newspaper down, and said, "No matter who is involved in this matter, no one's fate will be good." Quote. Miyaki nodded in agreement. It's not yet noon, and this matter has quickly fermented to the point that most of the people in Konoha village know about it, and the first sentence of many people when they meet has become, "You know that thing? Of course, the ninja has the greatest impact." Uruka was lecturing on it, and deep doubts flashed in Ino's eyes with her hands on her cheeks, and she found that today's Uruka teacher was not online, and she had missed nearly 10 times in 293 words in this class. This is not at all like Uruka's style, he is a very responsible person, especially to his own students, which is why he can teach the elite class of the ninja school. If something goes wrong, there must be a demon. Iruka made another slip of the tongue. He couldn't help but stop and apologize to the student. He knew that his actions were very rude, but after he finished reading the Konoha Daily today, he really couldn't help it. Iruka's parents were both ninjas, and the two died in the Nine Tails Rebellion, and he grew up orphaned on a Konoha pension. He was very grateful to the village for this, because he felt that if the village didn't give him a pension, he would have starved to death, let alone become a teacher at a ninja school. On his way to school in the morning, Iruka bought a copy of the Konoha Daily News to read as usual, and after reading the first news, he felt more and more wrong. If you think about it carefully, his father is a special ninja, his mother is a little weaker but also has the strength of a middle ninja, the income of the two of them is by no means small in a year, and the most important thing is that Iruka's parents never spend money indiscriminately. According to the data given in the first news article in the Konoha Daily, Iruka calculated, not to mention the remaining inheritance of his parents, let alone let him have no worries about food and clothing, even if he is a rich second generation, there is no problem at all. Chapter 78. The hand holding the textbook tightened slightly. Iruka's brain was also running rapidly while lecturing, and his mood was very heavy. If he could get his parents' inheritance back then, he wouldn't have to live so hard. Iruka remembers vividly that he didn't see a penny after his parents died. He has always received a pension that only maintains a minimum standard of living, and sometimes he has to buy an item at home, so that he does not have enough to live on for a month, and can only eat one meal a day. Who embezzled the money? It was the ninjas. Hard work. Iruka's parents died in the Nine Tails Rebellion. He was already 10 years old. How did the younger children live? Thinking of this, Iruka couldn't help but glance at Naruto, who was sleeping on his desk. Finally, after his 13th mistake, it was time for the end of class. He breathed a long sigh of relief, and then said to the students, "Students, that's all for today's lesson. We'll see you next week. Happy holidays everyone." Quote. "Ahaha, it's finally out of school. Moto-ji, let's go play, shall we?" "Sasuke, where are you going to play in the afternoon?" "Sasuke, do you want to come to my house as a guest?" The news of this afternoon's holiday has been known to everyone for a long time. And Iruka's frequent mistakes on the podium were not seen by anyone except for a few more delicate students. Hinata has someone from the family to pick him up, and Tooth takes Akamaru crazy and starts running around the village. Sasuke silently ignores the group of girls around him, and then walks out of the classroom door. Naruto is bored, and he also goes straight out to go home. Ino, Shikamaru, and Ding-si sat together, and none of the three of them left their seats, but Ding-si kept eating potato chips with a round face. "Hey, where are we going to play?" Shikamaru nodded at the table boringly, looking old-fashioned. The three of them grew up together, and this kind of thing is usually listened to by Ino. Ino thought for a moment and said, "Come to my house as a guest. My mother said that you haven't been to my house for a long time." Quote. A hammer was finalized. Ino, Shikamaru, and Dingji put on their school bags and set off directly towards the Yamanaka family's mansion, and half an hour later, the three of them arrived at Ino's house, but what they didn't expect was that Naruto and Akito Dingza were there. "Dad, Uncle Nara, Uncle Akamichi, you're all here." Ino immediately shouted with excitement after seeing the three of his fathers playing chess. Dingji and Shikamaru also greeted each other obediently. Yamanaka Haichi fell behind the black chess pieces, looked up and saw the three juniors standing together, smiled happily, and said, "Ino is back, and the two of you, Ju and Ding Zuo, said that they will come together today." Shikamaru glanced up at Lu Ju and said, "No, I want to come to my uncle's house today, so I'll come and visit." Quote. "Ha ha ha." Yamanaka Haichi laughed twice, then patted Nara Shikahisa on the shoulder and said, "Your son is really sensible, unlike my girl." Quote. "Dad, what are you talking about?" said Izum, glaring at Yamanaka. Nara Shikaku looked at Shikamaru's listless appearance. The corners of his mouth were one. He still didn't understand his son. He was probably pulled by Ino. Compared with Ino and Shikamaru, Ding-ji and Ding-zuo are very harmonious, and the greedy Ding-ji ran directly to Ding-zuo, picked up the snacks next to him and began to eat, looking very satisfied. Ding-zuo touched Ding-si's hair and smiled very gently. Oh, Ding-ji and Shikamaru have also come to the house as guests. Mrs. Yamanaka happened to come over with a new pot of tea, and happened to see the three of them. Shikamaru nodded and shouted, "Aunt Yamanaka." Quote. Ding-si hurriedly swallowed the snack in his mouth, and also shouted, "Aunt Shanjong is good." Mrs. Yamanaka put the teapot beside Yamanaka Kaiichi, then looked at Shikamaru and Ding-ji covered their mouths and chuckled, and said, "Aunt hasn't seen you here for a long time, and I miss you too strangely. Don't stay here, come into the house, I'll give you those snacks and pastries." Quote. Ino was really not interested in drinking tea or playing chess, and after listening to his mother's words, he immediately pulled Shikamaru and Ding-ji into the living room, and the three children played on the tatami mats in the living room. After a while, Mrs. Yamanaka brought over a lot of small snacks and a large bag of potato chips in her hand, all of which were placed on the table, and told a few people to have a good time, and then went out to cook by herself. Of course, most of the snacks were prepared for Ding-ji, and looking at Ding-ji, who was having a good time, Ino pouted, then turned to Shikamaru and asked, "Have you noticed that Iruka-sensei is a little absent-minded today?" Shikamaru nodded, took a piece of dim sum and ate it boringly, and said, "Iruka-sensei is a little strange today. He has been teaching us for 4 or 5 years, even if he was sick before, he has never made such a mistake. It seems that he has something on his mind." Quote. What? Ding-si, who was eating potato chips, paused, opened his eyes in confusion, and said, "Did Iruka-sensei make a mistake today? Why didn't I find?" The corners of his mouth twitched, and Ino glanced at Ding-si very helplessly, and said, "Even if it's in class, all your energy is focused on eating." Ding-zuo, who was eating at the same time as Ding-si, couldn't help but sigh when he heard this, and muttered, "It's really worthy of my son." Quote. The door of the living room was open, and the conversation inside and the three people outside heard it clearly, and Yamanaka sighed when he heard it, and said, "I didn't expect the Iruka family to be like this, alas." Nara Shikahisa held the white chess piece, "Good promise," and never fell, and frowned when he heard Yamanaka's words, and said, "It seems that this matter is 8 or 9 and 10. Quote. What do you mean? Ino heard Yamanaka's conversation, and immediately turned his head to the outside, and asked, "Dad, Uncle Nara, do you know the reason why Iruka-sensei is on his mind?" Yamanaka Haiichi shook his head and said, "It's not something you kids should know, you three play on your own." Quote. Ino wanted to say something, but Shikamaru grabbed his arm, then shook his head at her, signaling not to ask. Yamanaka Haiichi, Nara Shikahisa, and Akito Dingza were all a little silent. This matter had too much impact on all ninjas, although they were big families that had been passed down from generation to generation, but when they saw the news, they couldn't help but feel cold. The three of them actually know a little bit about this matter. Chapter 79. For some reason, almost all ninjas are not very good at developing the economy, and the financial power of ninja villages large and small is controlled by the daimyo. Because of the problem of money, many ninjas have to bend their waists, and even the powerful, Shadow, sometimes has to obey the orders of the daimyo and treat them with respect. If you don't have a good relationship with the daimyo, things will be a big deal. For example, the relationship between the daimyo of the Land of the Wind is very bad, which creates a very embarrassing situation. The Cheyenne village is short of money. But the daimyo does not allocate funds, so there is no money to consolidate the seal, and now the Cheyenne village has almost become the most watery of the 5 ninja villages. Although Kazekage has been trying to balance the income and expenditure of the village, the huge deficit every year is really sad. The relationship between Konoha village and the daimyo of the Fire Country is good, but the daimyo still set a lot of restrictions on Konoha village, and he can't let the village develop too weakly, and of course it can't be too strong. What the daimyo needed was an obedient ninja, a sharp blade, and an obedient army ready to protect him. The ninja war more than 10 years ago was the moment of life and death for Konoha village, and for the safety of the country, the daimyo of the Fire Country directly allocated a large amount of funds to Konoha village to fully support the victory of this battle. However, in times of peace, the daimyo of the Land of Fire began to cut financial support for Konoha 293 village. After all, he was afraid that Konoha's strength would develop too quickly and too strongly, leading to getting out of control. At present, when allocating funds to Konoha village, Konoha will first be asked to predict the use of the money, and then the minister in charge of allocating funds will carefully check whether the expenses reported by the ninja village are reasonable, and if so, deduct a part of the allocation. Because the ninja village will have mission income every year, it is enough to make up for this difference. The reason why the daimyo did this was to better control the development of the village so that it would not break away from the control of the state. But in a village, there will always be some unsavory organizations that silently take root, sprout, breed and spread in secret, and this kind of organization cannot be put on the surface, so naturally it will not be allocated by the daimyo. Mrs. Yamanaka's cooking skills are unique. Nara father and son, Akito father and son, plus the Ino family. The meal is very pleasant, especially Mrs. Yamanaka, seeing that the food she made is eaten cleanly. She is very satisfied with the corners of her mouth, and she is in a good mood. Touching his stomach, Shikamaru suddenly mentioned Yusha. Have you seen Yusha's kid, Biffy, these days? He hasn't come to play with me for many days since he came back from his last mission and invited me to dinner. Hearing Shikamaru mention Yusha, Ino couldn't help but complain, and he didn't know why he felt angry. Hearing his daughter talking about Yusha's stinky boy, Yamanaka's ears immediately pricked up, and Lugiu and Dingza also showed interest. Their friend cried and made trouble after getting drunk last time, saying that his daughter was snatched away by a stinky boy named Yusha. And Ding Si, who started to eat snacks just after eating, said, "Eat. Yusha invited you to eat again. You were too good, you didn't bring me." As he spoke, Ding Si suddenly thought of something, and asked with a shocked face, "Boys and girls go out to eat alone, is this the legendary date? I heard the girls in the class talk about it last time, and they also said that the boys and girls will kiss after the date." Dingji's thump directly left Haiyi's mind blank. Who, has his precious daughter already made progress with that stinky boy? No. Ino would never do such a thing. She's only 10 years old. Shikamaru also ran out at this time and coaxed. "I think Yusha is much better than Sasuke. I have to say that your vision is much better now than before. Wait until I go out to buy a gift to congratulate you." After speaking, he took a sip of tea slowly, looking like a little old man. At this moment, Ino was said that his whole face had turned red, his head was still steaming, his eyes had turned into mosquito coils, and he couldn't speak. "No. Yusha invited me to dinner to thank me for helping him at the last school festival. We just had a normal meal, and then Yusha gave me a psychic beast. Dating and pro. Kiss or something." After saying it intermittently, he immediately gave Ding Si and Shikamaru a burst chestnut, and asked the two of you to talk nonsense. Shikamaru and Dingji didn't care at all, firstly, because they had long been used to it, and secondly, they were attracted by the psychic beast that Ino said. The ninja school didn't tell about spiritism, or the ninja school taught little ninjutsu, but they were the children of a big family, and after the ninja school came back, the adults in the family would teach some things that the ninja school didn't teach, such as secret arts. Regarding the content of spiritism, people in the family told them a long time ago that spiritism is not difficult, and this ninjutsu is very strong and versatile, and the summoned psychic beasts can be used in various situations: direct combat, intelligence transmission, exploration, auxiliary ninja combat, etc. It can be said to be a very practical technique, but there are not many people who can do it. The reason is very simple: there are very few psychic beasts, especially those psychic beasts with special abilities and strong strength, and the scarcity is not an exaggeration. Ding Si blinked his eyes and asked curiously, "What kind of psychic beast?" Shikamaru also stared at Ino with a curious look. Seeing that the eyes of the two friends fell on her, Ino coughed twice, and then quickly sealed her hand, Haishuyu Shenwei, and as soon as the gesture was over, she pressed her palm on the table, and shouted, "Spiritism." For a while, no one noticed that she was missing. After a puff of white smoke, Pikachu appeared on the table, facing Ino, and whispered, "Pika Pika." Yamanaka Haiichi looked at Pikachu, then took a sip of tea, and said to Dingza and Lu Ju next to him, "This should be a low-level psychic beast, right?" Ding Zuo nodded and said, "Whether it's the size or the chakra, it looks extremely ordinary, and it should be a low-level psychic beast." Quote. The so-called low-level psychic beasts are those animals that are a little stronger than ordinary beasts, or they are ninja beasts that have been specially bred and improved. Such psychic beasts are generally temporary, they do not have the ability to think, and they do not have the ability to speak. And high-level psychic beasts are unavoidable in the entire Hokage world, and they generally have independent thinking, analysis, and language skills, and their strength is extraordinary. Chapter 80. Glancing at Pikachu, Lu Ju thought for a while and said, "This is also normal. I heard that Yusha you said before is a lower ninja, and he is also a wandering ninja from another village, so it is strange to have a high-level psychic beast." Quote. Although in their opinion, Pikachu is a low-level psychic beast, but its furry appearance is too cute. This small pet type of psychic beast is most suitable for girls. Almost all girls have no resistance to furry things. Yamanaka Hai glanced at Pikachu, and then looked at his daughter's love for it, snorted coldly, and then said sourly, "Yusha, this kid is really good at what he likes, and at first glance, he is a veteran of cheating on little girls." "Oh, Hai, why are you so petty?" Mrs. Yamanaka looked at Pikachu intently, and then hugged her, rubbing her heart wildly, and said excitedly, "Oh my god, it's so soft, it's so cute." Pikachu was picked up by the lady of the mountain and rubbed wildly, making it uncomfortable, and in order to struggle away, the red power bags on both sides of its cheeks suddenly had a trace of electricity, and then it immediately used 100,000 volts. Mrs. Yamanaka bore the brunt of the blow, and when the electricity went up, her whole body was immediately numbed by electricity, and then her hair banged, and turned into an explosive head, and her face was scorched. Because of the proximity, several other people also became like this. Pikachu took advantage of the chaos to escape from the arms of Mrs. Yamanaka, and then jumped on the table, buried himself in Ino's chest, and grabbed it tightly, not wanting to let go Z. Because Pikachu was just trying to escape, and didn't use much electricity, a few people were just electron bed, and there was almost no harm, and a few adults who came back to their senses immediately stared at Pikachu in shock. This turned out to be a ninjutsu psychic beast. Shikamaru touched his hair with a confused expression, and the corners of his mouth twitched and said, "My god, Ino, your psychic beast is too strong, right?" Ding Si also said, "There is really no trace of defense." Quote. Ino wiped the black charcoal on her face. The usual Pikachu was obedient. This was also the first time she saw Pikachu use ninjutsu, and she was also very shocked in her heart. Nara Shikahisa touched his burnt mustache and said curiously, "This little guy doesn't look weak, why don't you try its ability?" Akito Dingza nodded, looked at Pikachu in Ino's arms, and said, "It's not good, this little guy may be a big help for Ino in the future." Quote. Yamanaka Haiichi stood up and said, "Then let me try it, I also want to see how powerful this little yellow thing really is." Quote. No. Ino's face changed when he heard this, and he quickly held Pikachu tightly in his arms, shook his head at his father, and refused directly. "Pikachu is so cute, Dad, you will hurt it." Yamanaka Hai had a black line, and he hurriedly promised, "Ino, don't worry, I will definitely not hurt it, believe Dad." Quote. I don't want it." Ino tilted his head, now Yama Haiichi, and refused with a face. Pick up. When Pikachu heard this, he jumped out of Ino's arms and landed on the table, raising his head and shouting excitedly at Kaichi Yamanaka, looking eager to try. Ino watched this scene and said a little anxiously, "Kachu, what are you going to do? My father is a shinobi, you will be hurt." Shikamaru next to him patted Ino on the shoulder and comforted, "Don't worry about Ino, Uncle Yamanaka will definitely not hurt Pikachu." Quote. Pikachu also turned around and shouted comfortingly to Ino, "Pika Pika." Ino saw the battle intent and resoluteness in Pikachu's eyes, and although he was worried, he nodded and agreed. The backyard of the Yamanaka family was a small training ground, and a few people ran to the backyard with Pikachu, intending to fight here. Yamanaka and Pikachu stood on the east and west sides, while the others stood under the hallway and watched. After Yamanaka stood still, he beckoned to Pikachu and said, "You make a move first." Pikachu's performance just now let him know that although this big yellow mouse can't speak, it can understand. Pikachu was not polite after hearing this, and directly used a flash of electric light, centered on Kaichi Yamanaka, and began to move quickly. "It's too fast." Surprised to see Pikachu moving at high speed beside him, Yamanaka immediately retreated with his left foot and put on a posture ready to fight. Pikachu's speed was so fast that he could only brake statically. Yamanaka's most important ability is the secret arts, using strong mental power to control the other party, but Pikachu's lightning flashed, so that he had no way to capture Pikachu. Pikachu watched Yamanaka Kaichi take a stance, then spotted an opportunity and jumped behind him, and then his tail suddenly turned silvery white, and then flipped in the air, using his steel tail, and slammed into Yamanaka's back. "Ask for flowers." The moment Pikachu approached, Kaichi Yamanaka sensed it, and then immediately turned around, crossing his arms in front of his chest. For fear of hurting Pikachu, he didn't take out his weapon, but he had a protective gear on his arm. Pick up. The moment the tail collided with Kaichi Yamanaka, a hint of cunning flashed in Pikachu's big round eyes, and then he directly used 100,000 volts. Not good. Yamanaka discovered Pikachu's intentions, and chakra immediately gathered at his feet, and then forcefully withdrew from Pikachu's attack range. The 100,000 volts were empty, and they struck the ground, stirring up a puff of dust, and when the dust settled, there was a small pit on the ground. A drop of cold sweat slowly flowed from the corner of Yamanaka's forehead, and his eyes became more serious. Akito Dingza squinted his eyes, looked at Yamanaka Hayi, who was obviously parrying a little hard, and bowed his head to Nara Shikaku next to him and said, "Hayi is going to suffer." Quote. Well, Nara Shikaku shook his head and said, "Haichi has been underestimated from the beginning, and this Pikachu will have more than one ninjutsu. Moreover, Hayi is not an offensive ninja, he doesn't know much ninjutsu himself. The most important thing is that without the two of us, his combat effectiveness has dropped a lot." Quote. Yes, Chu Dao Ding nodded and smiled playfully, and said, "It seems that this old guy is going to lose face in front of the juniors, tisk." Yamanaka Haichi heard Nara's Shikahisa's laughter with a black line. If it weren't for the fact that there was a Pikachu staring at him on the other side, making him nervous and unable to distract from talking, he would have gone back a long time ago. No, the first strike is strong, and the second attack is suffering. Yamanaka Hai felt that he could no longer be beaten passively, so he directly launched an attack on Pikachu. Chapter 81. Seeing Yamanaka Haichi attacking it, Pikachu cheered up and immediately dodged it with a flash of electricity, without giving Haichi a chance to get close. Ino was still worried about watching the competition between Pikachu and her father, but after a while, her worries disappeared, and she couldn't help but clap her hands and shout happily, "Ah!" Shikamaru touched his chin, looking at this battle and becoming interested. He said, "Judging from the current form, Uncle Yamanaka is obviously at a disadvantage. Pikachu's target is too small, and Uncle's best secret technique can only be played at the right time or close to Pikachu, but it is obvious that Pikachu's speed is too fast and his actions are sharp, and Uncle can't capture Pikachu at all." Quote. Ding Si let out an "ah," and then asked with some doubts, "Isn't that Uncle?" 293, very embarrassed. Yamanaka Kaichi, who was in the middle of the battle, had no time to pay attention to the conversation of the few people watching the battle, and he also knew that he had to fight quickly, otherwise if he missed, where would his face go? The chakra under his feet doubled again, and Yamanaka Hai went to capture Pikachu, who knew that Pikachu was also very smart, and when he saw the menacing Hai, he avoided his edge and began to play hide and seek with him. Gradually, Yamanaka Hai became a little impatient at first. He saw that he couldn't catch Pikachu, gritted his teeth, and directly stretched out his hands to stop on the spot with the intention of messing with his body, but he didn't expect Pikachu to see this opportunity. Before the secret technique could be activated, Pikachu suddenly jumped into the air, and the power bags on his cheeks generated electricity, using 100,000 volts, and slashed at the local mountain hyena. Wow! Is Pikachu going to win? Ino said with an excited face as he watched 100,000 volts hit his father, and quickly clenched his fists. Shikamaru nodded and said, if nothing else, Uncle loses. Quote. Akito Dingji's eyes widened, and he said with a slight disbelief, this is the end. Just when the three children thought that the outcome of this battle had been decided, Nara Shikaku shook his head, touched Shikamaru's head funny, and said, in your eyes, does Haichi have such strength? Even if he loses to Pikachu, he won't be defeated so quickly. Quote. The three children immediately looked at the place where Pikachu's 100,000 volts hit, and Haichi Yamanaka, who was scorched, suddenly turned into a doppelganger wood. Ding Si immediately took a step forward and said excitedly, it turned out to be a stand-in technique. The battle could be said to be getting more and more intense, and Yamanaka Haichi emerged from behind the rockery, his palms were compared to a square, and then aimed at Pikachu, who was about to land. But Pikachu is not so easy to defeat, the Pokémon in Pokémon are all super high IQ, and Yusha, this Pikachu, is obtained through the system, and his reaction ability and combat talent are top-notch. Pikachu didn't dodge, but his tail turned white, and the moment he landed, he hit the ground with his steel tail, raising a puff of dust, and then quickly burrowed into the dirt hole himself. Kaichi Yamanaka's secret technique is empty. Damn, said Yamanaka, biting the tender flesh in his mouth, and when the dust cleared, Pikachu's figure had disappeared. Closing his eyes tightly, Yamanaka Hai began to concentrate on the direction of the hill. Suddenly opening his eyes, Yamanaka Hai shouted, not good. Pikachu made a hole in the ground, already under his feet. Suddenly, a burst of lightning pierced the ground and headed straight for Yamanaka Kaichi, who wanted to jump up after realizing it, but before he could gather the chakra, 100,000 volts were already on his body. Yamanaka screamed and then half knelt on the ground, his hair scorched again, and the expression on his face contorted with pain. Pick up, pick up. Pikachu suddenly jumped out of the hole in the ground, and then landed firmly on the ground, shouting twice excitedly, Pika Pika. Obviously, this game was a victory for Pikachu. Nara Lugiu covered his face, he couldn't see it, just now he said that Hai wouldn't lose so quickly, but this was immediately a slap in the face, but this psychic beast is too strong, right? Mrs. Yamanaka didn't care about Hai, who was half kneeling on the ground, but said to Ino very excitedly, my god, Ino, this psychic beast of yours is really a treasure, even your father has been defeated. Ino raised his chin a little proudly and said, yes, yes, Pikachu was given to me by Unitilda. Pikachu heard Ino's voice, turned around and trotted a few steps, then jumped up and jumped towards Ino's arms. Ino grabbed Pikachu, touched its head very happily, and praised, Pikachu, you are really amazing. The three children and a lady of the mountains formed a circle, frantically praising Pikachu. All of them were shocked by this harmless-looking yellow psychic beast with amazing combat effectiveness. Ding Zuo smiled and said, I really didn't expect it. This little thing called Pikachu can not only understand human nature, but also ninjutsu, and the key is so powerful, Hai is really embarrassed. Quote. Lu Ju drooped his eyes, sighed and said, one thing descends one thing, Hai is not suitable for fighting. But even so, Pikachu is very powerful, how can he have the strength of the middle ninja, right? Half kneeling on the ground, Yamanaka Hai smashed his fist on the dirt one by one, which was too embarrassing. Although he is not a combat-type ninja, he can't show his strength without cooperating with the other two, and he doesn't use weapons, but he can be defeated by a yellow fat rat or something. 5.8. Nara Shikaku glanced at Pikachu and suddenly said, that Yusha actually has such a good psychic beast. Ding Zha looked at Nara's words and said, this Pikachu is not an ordinary psychic beast, although it can't speak to people, but it is also very humane, such a good psychic beast Yusha is willing to share it with others. Kaichi Yamanaka, who had eased up, had just walked next to the two brothers, and he heard them discussing Yusha, and he felt that the kid was not a ghost of Ino's plot, and by the way, because of Pikachu's matter, Yusha made a hard note. The thought of the humiliation he had just seen in front of his most precious daughter made Yamanaka's face scorched by Pikachu even darker. Chapter 82. The newspaper in the hotel is usually delivered at noon, because he was anxious to read the third section of This Killer Is Not Too Cold. Xiaonan got up early and went to the newsstand to buy a copy, planning to take it back and read it slowly. After she finished watching the latest, This Killer Is Not Too Cold, she felt bored and began to read the news again. After reading the first news calmly, Xiaonan's eyes added a hint of irony. I really didn't expect that Konoha would have such a dark thing. The family of the dead ninja couldn't get the ninja's deposit, and in the end, life was so difficult that he had to rely on others for help. In Xiaonan's eyes, Konoha can be regarded as a more loving and peaceful village. After all, the image project of Konoha village is very well done, and most of the unsightly things are to find someone to take the blame and clean themselves up. With his hand pressed against the newspaper, Xiaonan looked up at the window, not knowing what he was thinking in his orange eyes. Raising her hand to cover the hair of her sideburns behind her ears, she said, 13, it seems that this is just a facade. No matter where you are, there will be a dark side, and this is the case in Rain Ninja Village, and the same is true of Konoha. Quote. In a forest on the outskirts of Konoha village, a middle-aged ninja wearing a forehead guard with the word, oil, written on it, long white hair hanging down to his waist, was running quickly in the direction of Konoha village. His red robe was blowing in the wind, and his face was a little gloomy. On the surface, he is traveling and writing books, but in fact he is secretly investigating. Xiao. Jiraiya received information yesterday night that the Akatsuki organization had sent 2 people to Konoha village after their last meeting. However, the intelligence did not indicate what the 2 people from the Xiao organization came to Konoha for, although there were 3 generations of the old man stationed, but he didn't worry about the village, so he still hurried all night and rushed back at noon the next day. The tall trees were gradually receding, and the tall Konoha castle walls were becoming clearer and clearer, gradually becoming outlined from a line, and even when Jiraiya looked up, he saw the Hokage stone statue carved into the cliff. Jiraiya saw that the old man's face was slightly moved, feeling everything familiar around him, and he thought in his heart. Finally back. I've been out investigating the organization for a long time. It's been a few years since I've been back to Konoha village. Wandering alone, even if it's accompanied by fine wine and beautiful people are always in your arms, there's a deep sense of loneliness. He is almost at the gate of Konoha village. Chakra has increased a few points. He jumped onto the city wall as fast as he can, and he doesn't want others to know that he is back. It was noon, and the villagers, who had been busy all morning, were either eating together in a restaurant, or shopping in 2s and 3s, and Jiraiya, who had used the transformation technique, walked alone on the streets, looking for suspicious people everywhere. However, I haven't found 2 people yet, but in a small stall in front of a restaurant, I heard a few nonsensical words, which made Jiraiya feel very strange. You don't believe me, so where do you say the money went? Said a middle-aged man who was more than a year old, took a sip of wine and said with some anger. A few people sitting next to him were also unconvinced, and a boy who looked to be in his teens pouted and said, Uncle, don't be unconvinced. Although I don't know where the money goes, what you say is absolutely unreliable. Quote. In my opinion, this money is not allowed to be swallowed by the people above, ha. Jiraiya also stopped, glanced in that direction, leaned over, and asked with a smile, Brother, how about it? What were you talking about just now? You don't even know. The middle-aged man in his 40s glanced Jiraiya up and down strangely, then took out a newspaper and pushed it in front of him, clicked on the first piece of news and said, Oh, that's it. Konoha Daily broke a big news today, and it made a lot of noise. Basically the entire Konoha knew about it. Because of this, today's newspapers were sold out. Big brother, you're from another village, right? Nodding perfunctorily, Jiraiya quickly scanned the news with a pair of eyes, and understood what happened. He silently suppressed the anger in his heart, and then asked, This matter is very big, isn't it that the 3 generations of Hokage also know? Patting his thigh, the middle-aged uncle said excitedly. Hey, I guess I already knew. Now as long as the ninjas in the village are idle and have nothing to do, they are investigating this matter. Like a few of our brothers, if they don't have that condition, they're guessing. This matter is so big, I guess there must be an explanation. Quote. Thank you, brothers. After thanking a few people, he left the small stall just now, and when he turned around, his face was obviously not good looking. Someone dared to embezzle the savings of a dead ninja, and this matter must not stop there. Jiraiya snorted and let go of the fist that had been clenched very tightly. It seems that this time he returned to the village. In addition to investigating the 2 members of the Konoha sent by the Shao organization, there is also a very important task. Walking down the street for a while, Jiraiya felt that he couldn't go looking for someone so nonsensical, and after thinking for a while, he planned to go find that Kakashi guy first. It is undoubtedly very difficult to find 2 powerful ninjas in the huge Konoha alone. When he came to Hachiki's house 577, he saw that the door was open, and he knew that Kakashi should be at home, so he went straight inside and knocked on his door 3 times. It's coming, it's coming. Kakashi yawned to open the door, then looked at Jiraiya very strangely when he saw him, and after making sure he didn't know the man, he asked, Are you? It's me. Jiraiya smiled, lifted the transformation technique, returned to his original appearance, and said, Kakashi, long time no see, won't you invite me in and sit down for a while? Jiraiya-sama. Kakashi shouted in surprise when he saw Jiraiya untransform, and then quickly turned sideways to let people in, and after inviting him to sit down, he asked, Why did you come back? Jiraiya put his hand on his knee and said, There is a very dangerous organization that has sent 2 people to the village. I can come back to investigate if I don't worry. Orochimaru joined this organization after defecting back then. Quote. Huh. Kakashi opened his mouth wide in surprise, and then said, Then let's report to the 3 generations of adults and ask him to send someone from the shadows to search. Quote. Shaking his head, Jiraiya said, At present, I don't want the 3rd generation to know about my return, so I came to ask you for help. Chapter 83. There are 2 reasons why Jiraiya left Konoha village in the first place. One is because of Orochimaru's defection, and the other is because he really doesn't want to participate in the internal affairs of Konoha village. Was originally a person who was indifferent to fame and fortune, and he was also very afraid of trouble. If the high-ranking people in the village knew that he was coming back, they would definitely have a fight with him, and he would never meet Danzong and Kaharu if he could hide. After thinking of Tuanzong, Jiraiya's eyes darkened a little. Although the main reason for Orochimaru's defection was because he had embarked on an evil path, this was inseparable from the help of that old thing in Tuanzong. Since Orochimaru's defection, Jiraiya has left the village almost on his heels to secretly investigate the news of Orochimaru. Through the various information collected in the past few years, he also learned that when he was in Konoha village, Orochimaru had secret contact with Danzong for a long time. The exact content is not clear, but he probably knows that Tuanzang is inseparable from human experiments, but unfortunately he can't get any definite evidence. Sighed, and was a little melancholy. Another reason why he doesn't want to show his face in less people is because of the 3 generations. Watergate has been dead for more than 10 years, and now the 3 generations are old and no longer young. The Hokage needs 5 generations. It's not that he thinks very highly of himself. If he appears in front of the 3 generations are allowed to talk to him about the 5 generations of Hokage. He is used to being free and lazy, and he is not interested in the position of the Hokage at all. Besides, Danzo wants to be the Hokage in his dreams. If he becomes the 5th generation, he is not allowed to make another assassination incident, and how can he deal with it at that time? Is he not guilty of this in the past like the 3rd generation, or is he not going to be involved in this kind of troublesome matter? Jiraiya hurried Sama, Jiraiya-sama. Huh. Jiraiya suddenly heard Kakashi's voice, and immediately woke up, looked at him a little confused, and asked, What's wrong? Kakashi looked at Jiraiya's confused eyes, spread his hands helplessly, and said, Jiraiya-sama, I'm asking how you need my help. Find those 2 people who sneaked into the village, and then arrest them. Quote. The people in that organization are not weak, don't make rash moves. Jilai also advised. After you find those 2 people, you will spy on them secretly, and then send someone to inform me. Quote. Kakashi nodded, okay. Quote. In Konoha village, Kakashi also has a small intelligence network of his own, which is why Jiraiya came to him for help. Without further ado, let's split up. Jiraiya stood up, and when he turned to leave, he suddenly remembered a person, the son of his own apprentice, and paused again, turned his head to look at Kakashi, and asked, you should know where the son of Watergate lives, right? Zillai also sighed a little, he wanted to see how he was doing now, it should be very similar to Watergate, right? Speaking of which, that kid's name still comes from one of his novels in the blink of an eye, 10 years have passed. Jiraiya plans to secretly go to see Naruto and see if he is doing well. After the series of turmoil of the Nine-Tailed Fox Rebellion and the death of the 4 generations of Hokage and his wife passed, Naruto's identity was asked to be kept secret, and the 3rd generation did not say it directly. But there is only one surname in the entire Konoha village, and that golden hair, coupled with the 9-tailed fox sealed on Naruto's body, almost all the Kamino of Konoha village know his truth. However, over the years, Kakashi has never visited Bo Feng Shuiman's son. Kakashi experienced the blow of his father's suicide, his companion's death, his own killing of his teammates, and the death of his most beloved teacher. Even if he didn't have a blackening mentality, he was very desperate, and what was worse was that no one told him, and he couldn't show it, so he relied on one person to bear it. So he numbs himself by doing tasks like crazy to keep himself from idle. After staying in the village for a few days without doing tasks, Kakashi went to buy a small yellow book to pass the time, and then left the village as soon as he had a mission. That's how Kakashi came over in the first few years. Later, after Naruto grew up and was able to live alone, Kakashi's mood was almost stable, although he no longer had to numb himself with the reason to do the task, but he really didn't know what to do after seeing the teacher's child, so he didn't go to see it until now. Still, he knew Naruto's residence. Now hearing Jiraiya mention Naruto, Kakashi's heart felt guilty, nodded at Jiraiya, and said, I know he lives there, Jiraiya-sama, let's go too. Quote. Let's go together, then. Quote. Jiraiya turned his head, and after using the transformation technique to change his appearance, he pushed the door and walked out of Kimu's house together. Naruto walked alone on the street with his hands behind his head, with a weed in his mouth, and he was even more bored after the holidays. Looking at the various shops on both sides of the street, Naruto's eyes rolled as he pondered whether to play a prank, or to go and play with Tooth and Shikamaru, who were among the few people in the village who were willing to mess around with him. Suddenly there was a cry from his stomach. Naruto stopped and rubbed his little belly. He hadn't eaten since the morning because it was too late to get up. Naruto wanted to go to a ramen restaurant near his house to eat a bowl of ramen. He hurriedly took out his wallet from his pocket, opened it and saw the amount of money inside, and his face immediately fell. It's only 10 taels, and even the cheapest Ichiraku ramen can't afford it. With a long sigh of disappointment, Naruto touched his stomach and glanced up at the bun shop not far away, planning to buy a bun to cushion his hunger. In front of the bun shop, Naruto handed the only 10 taels he had left in front of the boss who sold the buns, and said, "Boss, I'll buy a bun." The boss, who was sitting and napping, heard that someone Nuo Zhao wanted to buy buns, and quickly opened his eyes, and when he saw that it was Naruto, his eyes were full of disgust. He raised his hand and pushed Naruto's hand away, and said angrily, "Nine-tailed fox demon, if you don't want to be beaten, get out of here." Was pushed by the boss, 10 taels fell to the ground. Naruto's face was blue, hiding the loss in his eyes. He made a grimace, and before the boss rushed out, he squatted down and picked up the money and ran in the direction of home. Naruto was sure that there were only a few people in the village willing to sell him something, so he was already planning to go home and eat instant noodles directly. This scene just fell in the eyes of Jiraiya and Kakashi, and the two of them just stopped by, but they didn't expect to see such a scene. There was no emotion in his eyes. He walked up to the owner of the steamed bun shop, and asked with some confusion, "Why did you treat that kid like that? I think he just wants to eat a steamed bun, not to mention that he gave money." Chapter 84. The boss who sold the steamed buns looked at the person who came, thinking that it must be someone from outside the village, so he couldn't help but let out a long sigh, spread his hands and said, "You are an outsider, right? 10 years ago, it was he who caused the Nine Tails Rebellion. How many people? It's dead." At the end, the boss's eyes were a little red, and his spread hands were also retracted, and he held them tightly on both sides, as if he was immersed in great sadness. After a few more chats with the boss, Jirai returned to Kakashi's side, and the two of them walked side by side towards the place where Naruto had just run, silent. After waiting for the downtown area, Jiraiya asked Kakashi next to him unhurriedly, as the identity of Naruto's fourth son kept secret. Kakashi nodded and said, "Yes." Quote. Jiraiya nodded in understanding. If the people in the village didn't know that Naruto was Mizumen's son, then it all made sense. Tailed beasts, the matter of human pillar power, ninjas don't know much, and ordinary people don't know much about it. It is estimated that the people in the village don't know that Naruto is the son of the fourth generation, and they all regard him as the incarnation of the nine-tailed demon fox, so they will be rejected by many people. Looking at 293 with a pensive face, Kakashi said again, "If you don't reveal Naruto's identity, it should be the high level to protect him." Quote. As soon as these words came out, Kakashi and Jiraiya also frowned slightly, and the word, protection, hit both of them at the same time. A thought suddenly came to the minds of the two of them. If it was to protect Naruto, why not hide the identity of the other person's pillar force while hiding the identity of Naruto's fourth son? In the eyes of ordinary people, Naruto is a nine-tailed demon fox, but the collection of intelligence in the outer village is not a pig's brain, and the fact that Naruto is a nine-tailed pillar can be deduced from the rumors in the village at once. Moreover, the surname, Uzumaki, is so rare that there are very few descendants of the Uzumaki clan in the entire 5 major countries, and the words of Konoha village are the first generation of Mrs. Uzumaki Mito and the fourth generation of Mrs. Uzumaki Kushina, but both of them have passed away. In the entire Konoha village, there is now a Uzumaki Naruto's body with the blood of the Uzumaki clan, coupled with the yellow hair. It is inferred that there are really people plotting against him, and with a little bit of information, it can be deduced that he is the son of the fourth generation of Hokage wave feng shuiman. So what's the point of this concealment? Or hide Naruto's identity and make the people in the village think that he is an orphan who lost his parents in the Nine Tails Rebellion? Or just tell Naruto's identity although the people in the village will be jealous of him as a nine-tailed fox, but with the identity of the son of 4 generations, people should not have such a bad attitude towards him. What's going on with this kind of half-concealment and half-revealing operation? Zillai also frowned, and had some complaints about the practice of the 3 generations in his heart. How did the old man do it? Kakashi and Jiraiya didn't talk about it anymore in a tacit understanding, but followed Naruto closely, intending to go to his house to have a look. When Naruto got home, he opened the door and walked in, taking out a bucket of instant noodles from the locker and setting it aside, and then started boiling hot water. After the water boiled, Naruto opened the instant noodle bucket, put all the spices and other things away, and poured hot water on it. He carried the instant noodle bucket to the living room table and sat down, and waited boredly. Pouting and looking at the alarm clock on the table, Naruto was waiting for the instant noodles to be ready for the 3 minutes. On the way to follow him, I've been looking at Naruto's residence everywhere. This is the most ordinary residential area in Konoha village. His home is on the 2nd floor. But it seems that because of Naruto's nine-tailed demon fox identity, the whole building is only inhabited by Naruto. Although there are a few people scattered in the surrounding houses, it seems that all of them are bachelors, old people, etc., and it seems that the living conditions are not good. People with good living conditions, Biffy, have long since moved out of this area, and they don't want to live near Naruto, the incarnation of the nine-tailed demon fox. Kakashi and Jiraiya were all hanging upside down on the eaves of Naruto's house, secretly surveying the inside of his house. Dirty, messy, poor. Because Naruto grew up alone, there was no one to teach him how to do housework, and he was a boy, the mischievous kind, so he didn't want to clean up at all. The furniture in the room is also very simple, and it looks like it hasn't been changed for more than 10 years. Naruto finished drinking the last bite of soup in the instant noodle bucket, put down his chopsticks and rubbed his little stomach very satisfied. Although it was still slightly flattened, he looked very satisfied, and it was very good to be able to eat a bowl of instant noodles. After taking 2 sips of milk on the table, Naruto muttered, "I don't have anything to do on vacation, why don't I go find that kid from Shikamaru?" Thinking of Shikamaru, Naruto immediately got up and put on his coat, then happily opened the door and ran out, not noticing Kakashi and Jiraiya, who were watching him in the dark. After Naruto was far away, Jiraiya and Kakashi came down directly from the eaves, then entered his house through the window and began to look around. Kakashi came to the table in the living room and picked up a milk carton that Naruto had just taken 2 sips of, and he subconsciously wanted to smell the milk because he was very conscious of the quality of life. Frowning his eyebrows, Kakashi went back to look at the production date and expiration date on the milk carton, and looking at the number, he let out a long sigh and said to Jiraiya, "The milk has expired for several days, how can you drink this kind of thing?" Jiraiya nodded, picked up the instant noodles and looked at them, and found that they were the kind of promotional models sold in the store. Kakashi's eyes were dark. He came to the kitchen and opened the refrigerator, and found that it was empty, and said to Jiraiya, "There are no vegetables in the refrigerator at all. No wonder Naruto is thin and small, usually just eating instant noodles and drinking expired milk. Nutrition is impossible to keep up. 10-year-old boys, it is the time to grow a body." Quote. Although Kakashi doesn't like to cook and has been ordering takeout, he still pays a lot of attention to nutrition, so it's a bit unbelievable to see Naruto's life today. After hearing this, he said to himself, Watergate and Ju Sinai should have left a lot of savings. Where the hell does the money go? Kakashi, who walked to the living room, was slightly stunned when he heard Jiraiya's words, and then asked, "What do you mean?" Kakashi had been staying at home this morning and hadn't been out since then, so he didn't know anything big had happened in the village. In Kakashi's eyes, Naruto was just a very poor child, and he didn't think about it in that direction at all. Chapter 85. Don't you know? Jiraiya was stunned for a moment, raised his head to look at Kakashi, and asked incredulously, "Haven't you read today's Konoha Daily? You don't even know about such a big news?" Kakashi shook his head, becoming more and more curious, and he asked, "I don't have the she of reading newspapers, Jiraiya-sama, what happened?" Jiraiya saw that Kakashi didn't know it, so he described to him what he had seen and heard in the village this morning. Listening to this, Kakashi's face became very serious, he clenched his fists tightly, and said gloomily, "There is such a thing. Naruto is so poor, and the teacher's property must not have reached him. We must not let go of the mastermind behind the scenes, and this matter must be investigated." Jilai also clasped his hands around his chest, and also had a serious face. 283, nodded, and then said, "When I come back this time, in addition to investigating the 2 people in the village sent by that organization, there is one more thing to do, which is to investigate this matter clearly." Relieved, Kakashi said, "If Jiraiya-sama investigates it himself, then it will definitely be able to find out." Quote. Picking up the alarm clock on the table and glancing at it, he realized that it was not too early, and he said to Kakashi, "Kakashi, you hurry up and investigate those 2 people now, and I will also prepare to investigate this matter." Quote. Kakashi. Yes. After coming out of Naruto's house, Jiraiya and Kakashi went their separate ways. Jiraiya moves quickly on the roof of the village, and his goal is the Konoha newspaper office. Since this matter was first exposed by the Konoha newspaper, the newspaper may know something else. A steamed bun shop next to the Konoha newspaper office. Yusha crossed Erlang's legs, picked up the soup dumplings in the small steamer with chopsticks, dipped them in vinegar, and then took a bite of half of the buns, and the broth entered the mouth with the bun's skin, comforting the taste buds. Shi-Yan only ate 1 soup dumpling in front of her, and she really didn't have much appetite until the matter was resolved. Looking at Yusha's careless, slow-chewing appearance, she couldn't help but urge anxiously, "Lord, when are we going to continue the investigation?" After swallowing a whole soup packet, Yusha hurriedly interrupted Xian and said with a smile, "Xian, don't worry, eat more food to have the strength to work, right?" Xian thought about it and felt that it was too. She got up early today, and rushed to the Konoha newspaper office before she had time to eat, and then waited until it was lunchtime for Yusha to get up, and now her stomach was rumbling in protest. Yusha saw that Xian obediently began to eat lunch, and he also picked up another soup dumpling, emptying his mind while tasting the deliciousness. In fact, Yusha's current mind is not on the investigation at all, and when he was browsing his family's newspaper just now, he suddenly received a new task. Mission name: Sins in the Sun. Description: the evil thing of embezzling the ninja's inheritance has happened peacefully for a long time, which shocked everyone. As the exposer of this matter, please find out who is behind it, and give an explanation to the ninja's family when you do. Task reward: slashing sword's heavenly curse, and at the same time get a random ability experience card. Close black lens bracket. The rewards are too rich. Yusha subconsciously took the task. Although it's a little difficult. But there's no punishment for failure anyway. It's okay if you can't finish it. When Yusha was eating soup dumplings and thinking about how to complete this task, she suddenly felt stunned. Shi Yan's hand, which was about to dip the soup bag in vinegar, was also slightly fluttering, and then dipped it expressionlessly, and then quickly filled a whole soup bag into her mouth, chewed it twice and swallowed it. She was thoughtful, and she thought clearly about the reason at once. It must be because after that incident was exposed, someone came to the door, which was inevitable, but it didn't come so quickly, and there seemed to be a lot of people. Yusha quietly opened the game map, wanting to observe what was going on around him. At this look, he couldn't help frowning. There were 5 people in total, 3 of them were middle ninjas, 1 was upper ninja, and 1 was special ninja, and all of them were root people. After Shi Yan quickly finished eating the soup dumpling, he immediately stretched out his right hand and grabbed Yusha's wrist, lowered his voice and said, "Don't eat it, I'll take you away." In Xian's eyes, Yusha is just a lower forbearance. If she fights for a while, she still has to protect him, and she has no chance of winning at all, so she can only run away, and when she gets to a safe place, she will investigate which ones are targeting her, and when the time comes, she will find out the mastermind behind the scenes in Shunto. Yusha shook his head, put down the chopsticks in his right hand, and then gently patted Xian's hand to show comfort, and then said, "Don't be impatient, it's okay to do journalism without touching the interests of others. But if something shady or something breaks out, it's common to be targeted, so there's no need to panic." Quote, "Don't panic yet," Xian said a little anxiously. "Let me tell you, if I fight, I may not be able to protect you, there are too many people on the other side." Quote, "Hey, don't be afraid." Yusha looked experienced and fearless. He explained to Xian, "This steamed bun shop is prosperous, and now it's lunch time, and it's full of people, they definitely don't dare to do it in the steamed bun shop. On the contrary, the 2 of us went out of the bun shop, which was what they wanted and made it easier for them to do it." Quote. After saying this, Yusha paused for a moment, and then asked, "Xian, do you have a way to secretly contact your friends, or are there any ninjas you know nearby and ask them to do you a favor?" Quote. Xian was stunned for a moment when she heard this. She had a means to secretly contact other ninjas, but it was to call the team 1.5 Friends of the Dark Department. Only the Dark Department can be used when performing tasks. The situation between her and Yusha is a private matter. It stands to reason that it can't be used. Besides, the other party hasn't done it yet. Yusha saw Xian's reaction and thought that she had no teammates nearby, so she waved her hand and said, "It's okay, you don't have to care, I have a way." Quote, "Boss, bring me another cage of soup dumplings, thank you." Yusha suddenly beckoned to the owner of the steamed bun shop not far away, signaling for another basket of soup dumplings. Seeing that Yusha was eating without hurry, Xian didn't know what to do, so she could only tense her whole body and remain vigilant. Looking at Yusha in a tangled way, Xian was thinking about whether to use a password or not, it was really difficult for the two of them to escape. Chapter 86. After Yusha slowly finished eating the soup dumplings, she took out a piece of paper and wiped the grease stains on the corner of her mouth, then stood up, walked directly to the owner of the steamed bun shop, handed him the money, and said with a smile, "The boss checks out." Quote, "Okay." The owner of the bun shop took the money, then turned around and quickly opened the drawer to make change. He put the change in Yusha's hand, and said with a smile, "Come often in the future." "Well, okay." After saying that, Yusha walked directly towards the door. Several people scattered in the steamed bun shop secretly watched when they saw Yusha suddenly get up and pay and walked in the direction of the door, thinking that Yusha had already eaten and was about to leave, so they immediately gave each other a look, and stood up one after another, ready to pay and follow. Shion also watched Yusha pay and leave with a bewildered expression, looking completely ignoring himself, thinking that he was to dissociate himself from himself and face the danger alone. Hurriedly stood up, Shion followed Yusha, and asked, "What are you doing here? Didn't you say that they didn't dare to do it in the bun shop? Then why did you come out?" A smile rose at the corner of Yusha's mouth. He looked up at Shion, and explained, "I'm here to call a few people." Shion didn't react at all, she just stood in place in a daze. What is a person? As far as she knows, Yusha is just a wandering ninja who has just come to Konoha village for more than 3 months, and the people she knows are only limited to the juniors of Nara, Akamichi, and Yamanaka, and they are far away, so what is it called? Without waiting for Shion to react, Yusha chakra flowed slightly in his body, and he jumped onto the roof with all his strength. Looking around, there were people everywhere, and Yusha found that there were nearly half of the childhood restaurants on this street, and it happened to be the time for meals, so people came and went, and it was very lively. Yusha touched his chin and nodded with great satisfaction. He just wanted this kind of scene. Suddenly took out a handful of kunai from his pocket, and there was a detonation charm tied to kunai's body. Yusha weighed it twice in his hand. A smile rose at the corner of his mouth, and then he directly ignited the detonation charm, and then threw kunai into the sky with all his strength. The detonator exploded in an instant, producing a loud sound, and the kunai disappeared without a trace in the explosion. This street is full of pedestrians. This explosion immediately attracted the attention of the ninjas on the street. The ninjas involuntarily stopped and looked in the direction of Yusha, full of doubts. Unless it is in a special venue, it is forbidden to use detonators in the village, let alone in a prosperous area. Ordinary people are a little panicked, looking around in fear, looking for the source. After all, if there is a battle scene, their ability to protect themselves is very good. Shion looked up at Yusha, couldn't help but cover half of his face with his hand, and muttered, "My God, what is this little ancestor going to do? This will." The members of the Dark Department. Wait. A member of the Shadows had a flash of inspiration, and she felt that she understood Yusha's reason for doing this. The members of the 5 Roots were very confused. They had just finished paying and walked out of the door of the bun shop, and before they could do anything, the one named Yusha actually climbed onto the roof and threw a detonation charm. Yusha looked at the crowd that kept rushing towards him with satisfaction. His goal was about to be achieved, and he coughed and prepared to start speaking. Yusha tidied up his clothes, then straightened up and clasped his fists, and said in a loud voice, "Ladies and gentlemen, I am the president of the Konoha newspaper, and I personally interviewed and reported the news this morning. I hope you can listen to me." Quote. Speaking of which, the pedestrians on the street have already started to talk about it, and this morning's news has almost become known to everyone. So after Yusha explained that he was the reporter of this incident, the reaction of everyone was great. Looking at the noise below, Yusha coughed again, and then said, "At present, I am getting angry because of reporting that news, and someone is eyeing me. I wonder which hero is willing to help." After Yusha finished speaking, the people below were boiling. It seems that this news is absolutely true, and the masterminds behind the scenes have already come to the door, probably trying to kill people. Suddenly, a man with white eyes suddenly jumped up, stood beside Yusha, waved his big hand, and said solemnly, "In Shahanada Taka, responsible for the security of this street, I see who wants to make trouble under my nose." After the Uchiha was wiped out, The police force in Konoha village existed in name only, and no one really wanted to take over such a big mess. But in a huge village, public security is very important, and someone must manage it, so the major families of Konoha village have gathered people together to maintain the law and order of Konoha village. Sometimes there are not enough police officers, and the 3 generations of Hokage will also issue tasks that only people in Konoha village can take, and the content is to do the work of the police force and maintain law and order. And this long street belongs to the jurisdiction of the Hyuga clan. Since Hinata's wife became pregnant, he was not allowed to go out to take on tasks. After all, he had to take care of his wife. So Hinata Takashi took the initiative to ask for help, and took over the task of the police force. For ninjas, this is a more thankless job and the income is relatively low, but it is better to be safe and can go home every day. Today's news. Hinata Takashi also read it, and he was very emotional because of this incident, but when he heard that the author of the news report was chased and killed by the instigator behind the scenes, he couldn't help but jump out directly. And me. Suddenly, Yamashiro Aoba rushed out of the crowd, tapped on the wall with his feet, and landed directly on Yusha's left side, his hands on his hips, coldly glanced at the people below, and then said, "I also want to see what kind of person this person can be greedy for so much money from ninjas." Quote, quote. Yamashiro Aoba had just come out of the Konoha newspaper office, and he originally had the same idea as Jiraiya, so he went to the Konoha newspaper office to investigate. But I didn't expect that the president of the Konoha newspaper was not there, and the others were all employees, and it was inconvenient to disclose some things, so they only said that the president had gone to dinner. The key thing is that the employee didn't know that the president had gone there to eat. Yamashiro Aoba walked out of the Konoha newspaper office. He planned to go to have a meal and then wait slowly, but he didn't expect to encounter this kind of thing directly. Unable to suppress the anger that had been held in his heart for a long time, Yamashiro Aoba jumped out directly and helped Yusha stand on the platform. Chapter 87. After Jiraiya came out of Naruto's house, he and Kakashi split up, and he quickly ran in the direction of the Konoha newspaper office, but halfway through, he suddenly heard an explosion, and when he looked up, he saw that it was a detonation charm. Not good. His face sank, and he had a vague bad premonition in his heart. The direction of the detonation charm happened to be near the Konoha Daily. Could it really be as he thought? The Konoha newspaper knew other inside stories. If so, the explosion is not a good sign. After a moment's thought, Chakra added a few more points, intending to run as fast as possible to the place where the explosion occurred. Yusha stood on the roof, arched his hand to Hinata Takashi and Yamashiro Aoba, who were already standing beside him, and said very gratefully, "The two of you are willing to draw their swords to help. I am really grateful." Yamashiro Aoba put his hand in front of him and waved his hand. "This is wrong. Konoha Daily helped us ninjas expose such a big shady scene. It should be that we thank you. You can rest assured that we are here, and the other party will not want to hurt you a single hair." "That's right." Hinata Takashi also nodded, and said with a righteous face, "This matter is not only the business of Konoha newspaper, this is related to all the ninjas in our Konoha village, and no one will sit idly by." "That's good." Suddenly another ninja flew out of the crowd, jumped onto the roof, and after standing still, he said, "The people behind this curtain are really hateful." 293, I'll come too. With Yusha as the center, more than a dozen people came up on the roof nearby in an instant, including 2 ninja school students, who looked to be about 10 years old, about the same size as Yusha, and the 2 of them had a righteous and indignant expression. There were actually quite a few ninjas in the crowd, but many of them had a wait-and-see attitude, not that they didn't care about it, but most of them still didn't believe that the 10-year-old imp on the roof was actually the president of the Konoha newspaper, and they were a little skeptical of his words. After all, after Yusha became the president of the Konoha newspaper, it was the first time he showed his face in public. Those few people sat in their seats and pretended to eat steamed buns. They could really be said to be confused, and their minds couldn't turn in an instant. The 5 of them were about to follow Yusha out of the steamed bun shop, and no one expected him to make such a move, and move the rescue soldiers directly on the street. A middle shinobi touched his head awkwardly, and asked softly to the head of this mission, especially Shinobi Matsubara Motoyasu, "Head, what should we do now?" The corners of Matsubara Motoyasu's mouth twitched, and he lowered his voice Biffy and said, "Don't act rashly, the current situation is not good for us, let's take a look at the situation first." Quote. The 5 people of the route decided to stay still for the time being, and if they rushed out when the time came, they would really become pig brains. Xian raised her head and stared at Yusha in a daze. She really didn't expect that Yushabing's method was to pull directly on the street, which was too bold. Yusha, who was standing on the roof, looked at the crowd below, and at a glance saw the local and motionless Xian. He began to wink at her frantically. "This news material, why are you still stupid?" When Xian was almost cramping in Yusha's eyes, he finally picked up the camera and began to shoot. Click, and it was from multiple angles. Yamashiro Aoba came up for a while, glanced around the crowd underground, and found that there was no abnormality at all. Could it be that he had already run away? So he asked Shang Yusha, "Do you know where the person staring at you is?" As soon as these words fell, everyone's eyes fell on Yusha. I saw Yusha jump off the roof unhurriedly, take a few steps forward to the door of the bun shop, and directly point out all the 5 people. On the game map, all 5 people of the route are blood-red colors, and Yusha is easy to recognize. After Yusha finished pointing out, almost everyone's eyes fell on those 5 people, who were as strong as Matsubara Mototai, and their sideburns were instantly wet, and cold sweat broke out, which was also too scary. "I'm going. Why did this matter get here? I won't let people eat. Run, 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 wait for the fight, don't piggyback on a few of us." Quote. When a few people in the bun shop saw that the war was about to lead to the store, they immediately put down their chopsticks and ran out in a gloomy manner, talking about their stomachs or something. After all, their lives mattered. The boss looked at this tense scene without tears, and quickly calculated in his heart the losses he might suffer. Okay. Acceptable. Wiping the cold sweat on his head, he suddenly lowered his head and picked up his money box and ran, leaving Qingshan without fear of no firewood. Looking at this scene, Matsubara Mototai also had a big head and forced himself to calm down. Frowning, he frantically pondered what to do next. He glanced up in the direction of Yamashiro Aoba, where there were a total of more than a dozen ninjas, and the most powerful was Yamashiro, which was a special shinobi in the village. And although there are few people on their side, there is a Shangnin, and the strength of the other people is not weak. If they really want to fight, the other party may not be able to fight. However, in this situation, as long as you make a move, those ninjas who are watching in the crowd will definitely take action. Matsubara Motoyasu is a close confidant of Danzo, and there are very few people who have been involved in embezzling ninja money, and he is one of them, and most of the people in Genri don't know about it. When Tuanzo sent people to hunt down Yusha, when he gave the order, he said that someone was spreading rumors in the village, and that he was sent from another village to wreak havoc in Konoha village, so he wanted to send someone to arrest Yusha back. But what the inside story is, only he knows. The brain is running wildly, Matsubara Motoda is in a cold sweat, and his spine is wet. This matter must not be admitted, and he must be cleaned. When necessary, even if all 5 of them are sacrificed here, they must not involve Lord Tuanzong. Seeing that everyone around him was looking at them, Matsubara Mototai pulled his somewhat stiff lips, raised a smile, and was about to open his mouth to explain, when suddenly something unexpected happened. The middle shinobi who came with Matsubara Mototai jumped out directly, pointed at Yusha's nose and said, "We were ordered to arrest this person who spread rumors in the village and go back. It is definitely not to kill people and kill people, don't misunderstand." Stunned and rigid in place, Matsubara Mototai originally planned to say that Yusha had admitted his mistake, and the 5 of them just came here for lunch, and they were also very angry about what happened in the village, and they just had enough to have a good time. After all, they didn't admit it, they didn't do it, and Yusha didn't have evidence, so he really couldn't take a few of them. But unexpectedly, his subordinates jumped out. Chapter 88. The previous modification only said to catch Yusha, not to say that they are roots. Catch it back. Hinata Takashi jumped off the roof, walked to Yuna's side, stood still and asked, "Who are you?" In Konoha village, there are only two departments that can directly arrest people. One is the dark department around the three generations of Hokage, and the other is the Konoha police force, and no matter who the others are, they have no law enforcement power. The villagers in the dark department all know very well, they never show their faces, each of them wears a mask, and the 5 people in front of them have no masks and no uniforms in the shadows, so they are definitely not people from the dark department. As for the police force, Hinata's superiors did not give him any orders to arrest the head of the Konoha newspaper. Hinata Takashi looked at Matsubara Mototai with a calm face, and said, "Who sent you to arrest people? If you arrest people within the scope of my duty, you have to report yourself first, right?" Matsubara Motoyasu knew that the 5 of them couldn't be fooled, and usually they would wear the uniform of the dark department, wear a mask, and do it in the name of the dark department. But this time, Tuan Zhang specially explained that the 5 of them went in civilian clothes to arrest people, for fear that someone would find out the head of the root along the vine, and Matsubara Mototai instructed in advance before the action that this mission could not reveal their true identities, so the 5 of them came over after using the transformation technique. Now this situation was unexpected by Matsubara Motoyasu. He didn't expect that Yusha would play his cards so unconventionally, and directly ran to the street to detonate the detonator charm, causing such a big sensation. Now, there's no way to keep the fool around. Gritting his teeth, he immediately made a decision, raised his right hand and waved it forward, and said coldly, "Do it." In an instant, the scene became chaotic, and when the word, "hands on," was spoken, it meant that they definitely had something to do with it. The ordinary villagers didn't want to see the excitement anymore and began to run away one after another, leaving all the ninjas behind. "Go to a safe place in the back and stay." After Hinata Takashi heard that the other party was about to make a move, his right hand immediately put on Yuna's shoulder, and then stepped forward and protected Yusha behind him with the other ninjas. "Roll your eyes, open." At the same time, dozens of other ninjas also rushed forward, and together with Hinata Takashi, they attacked the 5 people in the bun shop, and the 2 ninja school students who had not yet graduated also wanted to join in the fun, but they were grabbed by the quick-eyed Yamashiro Aoba one by one and thrown behind. For a while, the fight was not lively, the kunai and ninjutsu flew around, and after a while, the bun shop became a ruin. Shion has been called back to Yusha and asked her to protect herself. This stupid girl just wanted to join the battle group, and she didn't think much about the safety of her president. Yusha held the camera, and the shutter could not be stopped for a moment, and when the time came, he must make a large page and report it well, and the print run would be doubled, no, tripled. Such a vigorous news is not afraid that the newspaper will not sell. Back to the war group, although there are only 5 people on the root side, they gradually have the upper hand. The reason is that the ninjas on Yusha's side are a little restrained in fighting. You must know that this is in Konoha village, and there are still a large number of people in the surrounding buildings and houses, for fear of affecting them. And the people of the root have no scruples, which makes the group of ninjas such as Yamashiro Aoba and Hinata Takashi distracted to protect the villagers when they fight. But this situation only lasted for a while, and the people of General were suppressed, because it was only 2 or 3 minutes later, 8 ninjas rushed from around to join the battle group, and after a while, the 5 people of General had to fall into the sea of Wangyang of the ninja crowd, and their defeat was already doomed. The sweat on Matsubara's head became more and more, and he licked the tooth that hid the poison pack, thinking about whether to bite it after being defeated. "No, my life has just begun. After pretending to be a confidant for so many years, I finally became a confidant of Tuanzong, as a special ninja but with a ninja as a subordinate. At the root for a while, it was in the limelight, and I haven't enjoyed it. How can I capsize in such a gutter?" Thinking like this, Matsubara Mototai began to fight and retreat, slowly breaking away from the battle group, and he really succeeded in the chaotic fight, and no one found out his intentions. The strongest people on the other side were busy dealing with the shinobi under him, and he had been thinking about how to break the game just now. He hasn't used all his strength, so now there are only 3 middle ninjas and 2 lower ninjas around him. That's okay. I, Mototai Matsubara, ran today. Shikara erupted at his feet, moving quickly forward. The strength of his hand increased a little, and he held kunai with his backhand and slashed at the lower ninja that was blocking in front. Kahara Yuho watched the chopping down kunai, and hurriedly blocked it with his short knife, still wondering why the other party's speed was so much faster all of a sudden. Matsubara Mototai had already changed his move, and a roundhouse kick kicked him in the chest, and his throat was sweet, and Kahara flew out upside down. Boom! Yuho Kahara, who smashed on the roof, kicked up a puff of dust, and he was angry for a while. For a while, a gap appeared in the encirclement around Matsubara Motoyasu, and seizing this fleeting opportunity, Matsubara Mototai took out 2 smoke bombs and smashed them on the ground. Not good. The other people surrounding him were even fools, and at this moment they also discovered Matsubara Motoyasu's intentions, and he actually wanted to abandon his teammates and run away alone. Immediately rushed forward, but suddenly felt that something was wrong. Hundreds of kunwu smoke scattered everywhere, and several people could only stop to block it. Wind escape. Great breakthrough. A middle ninja immediately released a ninjutsu, and after blowing away the kunai that shot in his direction, the ninjutsu continued to blow away the smoke forward, and at this time, the figure of Matsubara Mototai was long gone. Where are you going? There are people guarding the other directions, and the other party can only run from the gap that has just opened if he wants to run, and following this line of thought, several people began to look in the direction of Kahara Yuho, but they couldn't find it. In a small alley hundreds of meters away from the war group, a kunaisho that had just been thrown out of the smoke lay there quietly. Suddenly, there was a bang, and a cloud of smoke exploded, and there was a figure faintly in the smoke. Yes, this person was Matsubara Mototai who had just run out. He used the transformation technique to turn himself into kunai, and then used the shadow clone to mix himself in the real kunai and throw it out together. Just as Matsubara Mototai breathed a sigh of relief and was about to go back to report to Danzo, his eyes suddenly darkened. Taking a step back, Matsubara Motoyasu stiffly raised his head, looked up and down at the middle-aged man standing in front of him, and saw that he was tall, with a forehead guard with the word, oil, written on his head, a red coat, and clogs on his feet, and the most eye-catching thing was the huge scroll he was carrying behind him. Chapter 89. Jiraiya had already arrived at the scene when the fight began, but instead of coming out directly, he hid in the shadows and observed, unlike other ninjas in that he had long been aware of Matsubara's intentions. Trembling and pointing at each other, Matsubara Mototai said in disbelief, You're a man, haven't you traveled? Jiraiya looked at Matsubara Motoyasu's somewhat pale face, and said with some mockery, I didn't happen to come back to do something, so I encountered this scene. Quote. Standing in front of him was one of the 3 ninja of Konoha Toad Immortal Jiraiya. Matsubara Motoyasu knew that he could not be Jiraiya's opponent, but even if the probability of escaping was small, he had to try. Throwing the smoke bomb again, Matsubara Motoyasu wanted to repeat his old trick and escape through the smoke cover, but Jiraiya's combat experience was so rich, how could he let him succeed? Toad's mouth bondage technique. Jiraiya quickly sealed, and then directly summoned the stomach wall of the Toad of Myoki Mountain Iwaju, and trapped the person when Matsubara Mototai threw out the smoke bomb. Still want to escape? Jiraiya scoffed, then approached 11 Matsubara Motoyasu's side, flew up and kicked him towards the Toad's stomach wall. As soon as Matsubara Motoyasu's body touched the stomach wall of the Toad, he fell directly into it, and then he was trapped in the stomach wall and couldn't move. Damn! Matsubara Mototai mobilized all the chakras in his body to break free, but failed. The Toad's stomach wall was wriggling, but he did not move. Jiraiya walked slowly in front of Matsubara Motoyasu, stretched out his left hand and snapped his mouth open with brute force, directly pulling out his fangs. HMPH. Matsubara snorted, his expression painful. Keeping his mouth open, Jiraiya pulled the missing tooth and poison bag out of his mouth and examined his tongue. The seal of the tongue vortex eradication. You are indeed a member of Tuanzong. Looking at the neat black lines on Matsubara's tongue, Jiraiya said with a gloomy face. The seal of the root of the tongue is a sealing technique dedicated to the root, and the danzo puts a curse mark on the tongue of the root member, and if the person who performs the spell says anything about him, his whole body will be paralyzed and he can neither speak nor move. The melee scene became more and more intense, although the remaining 4 roots attacked fiercely, but they were really invincible with 2 fists and 4 hands, and as more and more ninjas joined, they gradually began to be unable to parry. When the chakra was exhausted, when the 4 of them were about to be caught, a upper ninja and a middle ninja directly bit through the dressing bag hidden behind the teeth. Poof! Poof! Twice, the middle ninja and the upper ninja fell one after the other, shocking all the ninjas present. Everyone stopped and watched the change. Hinata squatted down in disbelief and put her hand under the bridge of the nose of the fallen shinobi, completely not breathing. The 2 people who were still fighting bloodily just now were already 2 bodies, and the ninjas who were doing it on the side couldn't help but boil. This is a dead soldier, right? I'm about to be caught and commit suicide by taking poison. Oh my god, what the hell is going on? Quote. Chuanzong sent a total of individuals this time, and now except for Matsubara Motoyasu, who was captured by Jiraiya, there are still 2 middle ninjas left. A middle ninja glanced at the tragic image of the 2, hesitated for a while, and finally did not bite the poison bag hidden in his teeth. Thinking about it carefully, he was to join the route back then, and then he was half brainwashed and half forced to stay by Tuanzang. Now is not a good time to break away from the route. Damn. After a long time in the route, just now I really had the idea of being loyal to the group. The other Nakashinobi who was still standing, the same person who jumped out just now and said that he was going to catch Yusha, his face was full of disbelief. He took 2 steps back, and shouted in a blow, "Oda, Furukawa, why are you 2 doing this?" Yusha had been silently observing just now, and he noticed from the beginning that the 2 middle ninjas who did not commit suicide by taking poison were different from the 2 who had just committed suicide. They were not directly in a desperate state, and the 2 of them were still very measured. And the middle ninja who jumped out and threatened to arrest him back just now, he looked indignant, as if he really thought that the villagers were bewitched. Didn't you say that Gen is an emotionless killer? Yusha thought carefully. Although 2 ninjas have died, there are 2 other ninjas who have not been solved, and the 2 of them are also exhausted, and the 2 of them struggled for a while, and were immediately caught by both of them. After a while, 6 people from the shadows suddenly came, and one of the leaders stood in front of Hinata Takashi and asked in a deep voice, "What's going on?" Hinata explained, "These 4 people are related to the news that the property of the dead ninja was embezzled, published in the Konoha Daily today, and they came to assassinate the president of the Konoha newspaper." Quote, "Assassinate the president of the Konoha newspaper? Hinata Takashi pointed in Yunatsu's direction and said, "It's this little brother. By the way, there is another person who has run away." Quote. With a wave of his hand, the 2 members of the shadows nodded at the same time after receiving the signal, and then quickly left to hunt down the person who had escaped. The rest of the members of the dark department couldn't help but look in the direction that Hinata Takashi was pointing, but after seeing people, they were all stunned for a moment. A 10-year-old child, who turned out to be the president of the Konoha newspaper. Standing next to the so-called Konoha newspaper president was 273 and their colleague, Yutsuki Shion, and several members of the dark department were very puzzled as to why Shion was here. The 4 people in the shadows turned their heads and made eye contact, but no one spoke to Shion. After all, when she's not working, she's just an ordinary ninja in the village. Then leave these people to us, and wait for the fate of the 3 generations. The leader made a gesture, and the 2 immediately went to pick up the 2 corpses lying on the ground. The 2 still alive, roots, of the middle ninja were also handed over to the dark department. Several people glanced at each other, and just as they were about to retreat, Yamashiro Aoba suddenly stood a step forward and said, "Wait." Several people in the dark stopped and motioned to Yamashiro Aoba to say. Yamashiro Aoba's clenched fists loosened, and he asked, "I wonder if the 3 generations of adults have read this morning's Konoha Daily." That's right. A middle-aged ninja with a big beard also stepped forward and asked loudly, "How will the 3 generations of adults deal with this matter?" A very gloomy-looking woman stroked her hair, and also said, "You must catch the mastermind behind the scenes. These people are ordered by others, and there must be people behind the scenes." Quote. Talked about it for a while, but all the people here in the shadows were silent. Chapter 90. For everyone's questions one after another, the people in the dark department were very silent, neither blocking nor paying attention. After all, this matter was very important, and it was really difficult for them to answer anything. The people who watched the shadows didn't speak, and several ninjas looked at each other, and they gradually stopped, and the scene quieted down, and the air was filled with resentment. "Let's go." Seeing that the people around him were all shut up, the members of the dark department led by him whispered, and the four of them directly took away the people of the route. After this battle, the bun shop was destroyed, and this area was also a mess. But fortunately, none of the people on Yusha's side died, and only one ninja who was beaten by Matsubara Mototai was injured, but the situation was fine and was sent to Konoha Hospital to bandage his wounds. After watching the members of the dark department leave, Yusha immediately took a few steps forward, stood in the center of a group of ninjas, and thanked him. "Thank you for solving my predicament. If it weren't for your help, I guess I would have been forcibly taken away by this group of people today." Quote. After Yusha rushed to the roof of the house and detonated the detonation charm, 10 ninjas and 2 ninja school students helped him stand on the platform, and then a fight broke out, and the ordinary villagers immediately ran away and found a safe place to hide. At this time the 6 ninjas who were mixed in the crowd also stood up and joined the battle. Subsequently, 17 more people came one after another. After listening to Yusha's words, Yamashiro Aoba said, "This is as it should be. Your newspaper broke the news of the incident, so that many ninjas who were kept in the dark knew the truth of the matter." Quote. That's right. Hinata Takashi also nodded and said, "If this thing is not exposed, who knows when it will be ahead." A man with a scar on his face said, "Little brother, what you said is too obvious. It is right for all Konoha people to help each other." The crowd was discussing. Inadvertently, some of the crowds that were watching the excitement were gathering in this direction, and the civilians who had just run away in fear because of the battle also came out. Everyone was talking about what they had just seen, and those who came later didn't know what was going on, but they felt that there was a lot of excitement ahead, and when they arrived, those who had witnessed the whole process added fuel and vinegar to the people who came behind. But there are a few ninjas who have just come to help, but they are ready to leave. Some are withdrawn and like to be alone and are not suitable for this environment, and some are ready to brag to Wuyu and talk about it well. Seeing this scene, Yusha first said a few words to Ryosuke Yamada, who had already come out of the newspaper, and asked him to take out the money, and then hurriedly jumped on the roof again, coughed twice and said loudly, "Stop, and those brothers who just helped don't go, listen to me first." As soon as everyone saw that it was the main owner who was talking this time, they immediately quieted down, wanting to hear what Yusha had to say. "Everyone helped me this time. I have a long summer. Today's love I must remember in my summer. If you have anything to use my summer place, I will be a spring in return." Yusha hugged his fist to everyone, and then continued, "When I asked for help just now, I said that I would be rewarded with a lot of money. To express your kindness to me, Yusha has nothing good to give you, and I hope you will accept this little thing." Quote. After informing the editor-in-chief who had already taken the money from the Konoha newspaper office, he gave each of the 35 ninjas a big red envelope of 200,000 yuan as a reward, but everyone refused to accept it. "Little brother, what are you doing? Are we the greedy people?" a man with a scar and an extremely arrogant scar said angrily. "That's right, you can put this money away." Yamashiro Aoba shoved the money back into Okita's hand. "I'm here to investigate the truth of this matter. If you really want to be grateful, can you tell me if your newspaper still knows anything inside?" Quote. Everyone's ears were pricked up, and Yusha showed a wry smile. "I also felt a little puzzled when I read the news collected by the newspaper reporter that day. The income of ninjas is also high. Why are their widows living so miserably? So I thought about investigating deeply, but I didn't expect to dig out such a big case today. The truth was angry, so I directly wrote all the contents of the investigation in the newspaper and published it, and the rest of the inside story is really unknown." Seeing that Yusha's expression didn't look like a fake, Yamashiro Aoba didn't ask any more. In this case, I'll take my leave first, and go to another place to investigate. As for Yusha's junior brother, for your safety in the past few days, you better go to the Hokage to send a mission first, and find a few powerful ninjas to protect you. This big brother is right. I'll wait and ask a few Shangninas to protect me. By the way, I don't know what to call it. Aoba Yamashiro. Shion, who has been following Yusha next to him, saw that he had already chatted with a group of ninjas in just 10 minutes, and called him a dumbfounded, this little ghost. Where did he get such good communication skills? Did he rely on this to get to the position of the president of Konoha in just a few months? Brother Shancheng, you don't accept this money, but you have to let me find a way to thank you. Otherwise, I really don't want to go. Without waiting for them to shirk, Yusha continued. I know a restaurant, where the dishes are exquisite and delicious, and the service is considerate. I will make a meal tomorrow night. Let's enjoy our faces and eat together. The enthusiastic look of the good ninjas really couldn't shirk it, and after saying the name of the restaurant, everyone said that they would definitely go. After solving the matter here, Yusha just wanted to go back to the newspaper office, and suddenly thought of something, and said loudly and sincerely to the surrounding villagers who were still watching the excitement, how to say that today's battle is also because of me, so that everyone is frightened, and it has also caused economic losses to many people and stores. This loss everyone will calculate it. It will be counted in my account. Yamada, editor-in-chief, wait for you to send someone to help count it, and report the number to me at night. Quote. That arrogant big guy made a group of people applaud, and Yusha was satisfied when he saw this scene, because he suddenly remembered that the report was originally to give himself prestige. At this moment, Shion was also very spiritually filmed this scene and recorded Yusha's word.